fatal shooting this morning as the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports police are still looking for the gunman.
Just before sunrise, a masked figure opened fire outside a luxury hotel in Midtown Manhattan, gunning down Thompson and then fleeing through an alleyway, according to police. He was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Thompson had worked at United Healthcare for 20 years, and as CEO since 2021, he oversaw what has become the country's largest private healthcare company with nearly $400 billion in revenue. The NYPD had just announced a dip in crime overall across the 5 boroughs of New York City. According to member station WNYC, this is the first fatal shooting all year in the precinct that includes tourist attractions like Radio City Music Hall and Rockefeller Plaza. Quill Lawrence, NPR News, New York.
President-elect Donald Trump's nomination to become defense secretary is facing uncertainty. Pete Hegseth has been accused of sexual and other misconduct that he denies. And an email written to him in 2018 by his mother, Penelope, has now surfaced. It says that she had no respect for a man who mistreats women. Penelope Hegseth says she retracted that email and that he's a changed man. She appeared on Fox and Friends today in an effort to shore up her son's nomination.
I am here to tell the truth to the American people and tell the truth to the senators on the Hill, especially our female senators. I really hope that you will not listen to the media and that you will listen to Pete.
Pete Hegseth is a former Fox News host. President-elect Trump's nominee to lead the Drug Enforcement Administration is withdrawing. Chad Chronister, a county sheriff in Florida, wrote online that as the gravity of the responsibility of the job set in, he decided to withdraw. Chronister has little experience in managing a large, complex organization such as the DEA. Opposition politicians in South Korea have submitted a motion to impeach the president. This comes after his failed attempt yesterday to put the country under martial law. NPR's Anthony Kuhn reports lawmakers unanimously voted to overturn the president's order.
Lawmakers from 6 opposition parties submitted their impeachment motion, and unless President Yoon Suk-yeol resigns, the bill will be put to a vote in Parliament as soon as Friday or Saturday. Lawmakers also moved to impeach Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun for his role in the martial law declaration. Kim has offered to resign. Protesters marched outside Parliament and in other cities calling for Yoon's impeachment. The crisis has caused South Korea's currency, the won, to tumble to a 2-year low against the dollar. The government has pledged to pump unlimited cash into financial markets to help stabilize them. Anthony Kuhn, NPR News, Seoul.
You're listening to NPR. The Associated Press has called the last outstanding race in the House of Representatives. Democrat Adam Gray has defeated incumbent Republican John Duarte in California's 13th congressional district, south of San Francisco. The ballot counting took time. Gray won the race over Duarte by only about 200 votes. Heavy snow continues to fall on much of the Great Lakes and Northeast today. Parts of western New York are already under feet of snow. Forecasters say areas around Buffalo could get another 20 inches of it. Huge swaths of Cuba have once again been plunged into darkness. NPR's Ada Peralta reports the island nation has been struggling to keep power flowing.
Cuba's Ministry of Energy and Mines is blaming the latest power outage on a short circuit at a thermal plant east of Havana. For more than a year, Cuba's grid has been on the ropes. The system is aging and in disrepair, and oil supplies from Venezuela and Russia have been dwindling. In October, 2 different hurricanes caused total blackouts. The government says it cannot repair the system because of the U.S. embargo on the island. Critics of the government say the system is in shambles because of mismanagement. Officials say pockets of Cuba are starting to receive electricity. The limited power, they say, will be used to pump water. Ada Peralta, NPR News, Mexico City.
Police in England have recovered a stolen van that belongs to an award-winning chef. Inside were more than 2,500 savory pies worth about $32,000. But the chef says the pies were too damaged to be eaten. In October, thieves stole nearly 1,000 wheels of costly cheese from an English dairy. These have never been found. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, supporting books, radio, podcasts, film, television, theater, and more to bridge science and the humanities. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Houston Rowdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you, Jamie. Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island zooms in at 11:30. He's going to talk to us about a lot of things, including his attendance at the climate convention overseas. And Representative Pressley, Ayanna Pressley, will be here around 1:30. And we, Jim and I, that is, will be back here on Friday at the Boston Public Library.
Hello, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
That's what you say next.
I know, I forget to say
Hi,
that,
Marjorie.
Jim.
How are you?
I'm good.
So we're starting in the morning with a roundup of some of the Trump government nominees, his picks so far, like Pete Hegseth. I've got to speak fast because he may be out soon. He's tapped for Secretary of Defense. He's on the defense himself, contending with rape allegations and the crushing weight of his own mother, saying she has no respect for him because he, quote, belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, and uses women for his own power and ego, in quotes. RFK Jr., tapped to go wild on health. Well, he's gone wild in other ways, too. He has a litany of sexual misdeeds on his resume. Affairs, groping babysitters, not to mention the account from the New York Post about his list of more than 40 mistresses categorized in his phone by letter G, which his late second wife believes stood for, I believe it's Gumar, the Italian-American slang for mistress. Then there's Kash Patel, Trump's pick to lead the FBI, has a long history of MAGA merch schemes, perhaps one of the biggest grifters of them all. One of his projects includes a conspiracy-laden children's book about Hillary Clinton. Then there's Elon Musk. We don't have time to list all the stuff. Well, actually, we'll list one thing, that he and the other executives at SpaceX judge women who work there by their bra size. So will there be, this is actually a serious question, will there be a trickle-down effect of debauchery and immorality on our own daily lives? If these people can do whatever they want, not just Donald Trump, maybe the rules don't apply to anyone anymore. Seriously, we'd love to hear from teachers, and if you're worried about how your students are going to take this news when they hear about it, parents, anybody at 877-301-8970. I always assumed that Trump's immorality and criminality was, I don't mean an aberration in terms of we could all still be moral and, or most of us anyway, moral and decent. But when there's such a large swath of, as I said, debauchery in his picks, is the message, I mean this sincerely, is the message to people, even if it's subliminal with teens, with this kind of thing, that nothing you do is a bar to advancement in the society. You can be president, you can be the Secretary of Defense, you can be, well, you can't be the Attorney General in the case of Gates. The number is 877-301-8970.
Well, first of all, I only think you can get away with it if you're a white man. Otherwise, you can't get away with it. Kash Patel is Indian, but he is in that category where I think you can get away with it.
How about Linda McMahon? Linda McMahon of World Wrestling, WWE, she and her husband, Vince McMahon, apparently did nothing when employees were going after some of the ring boys and that sort of things in sexual ways.
Well, I think if
she's a woman,
I think if she herself had been going after the ring boy, it would have been a different story. But I think we can't stop there with the anti Me Too movement stuff. I mean, I think I was watching television last night, thinking to myself when I was hearing about Hegseth, wondering how many times can you be carried back to your room at an event because you're too sloshed to just walk back to your room before you're out of contention. Or how many small organizations, he ran a couple of small organizations like Concerned Veterans for America and Vets for Freedom. How many small organizations can you run into the ground financially and have people have to push you out before you're maybe thought not fit to run a massive organization?
Well, there's actually a better thing on his list, if I may, Marjorie.
Yep.
How many women can you impregnate who are not your wives and still be qualified to be the Secretary of Defense? And again, that's not really our issue today about whether you can get confirmed. The issue is you wake up, your teenage kid says to you, wait a second, this guy, how many times have you been married? 3 times, which is fine.
3 times.
That's fine. But while
it's a lot when you're only in your 40s.
Married, he usually impregnates somebody he wasn't married to and occasionally marries that person.
Yeah, that's right.
Next, when your kid says to you, why is that kind of sexual immorality acceptable? Hey, by the way, Mom, is that impregnating anybody that we don't know? I mean, I'm serious. You know, what is the impact of this guy. And by the way, in the spirit of fairness, which
have you ever been,
spirit of fairness, which we have not embraced, Joe Biden didn't do himself proud either. The other thing you try to teach young people in this country, honor commitments you make. When you make a promise to people, whether it's your kid, your spouse, your co-workers, your whatever, you should honor that commitment. And he obviously didn't do that with his son.
Yeah, I'm in a different place with you on the pardon.
Well, then you shouldn't have made a promise repeatedly that you're going to break.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't have made a promise he was going to break. But when Donald Trump won and Cash Patella's got the long knives are out for Hunter Biden, he could have gone to jail. I know you said the judge will intervene. I don't
think it was good that he trashed his own Department of Justice too? That's really good.
Well, I don't want to get off topic.
Okay, go ahead.
But if anybody in the United States of America thinks the Justice Department is fair in terms of sentencing, in terms of who gets prosecuted, in terms of who goes to jail, it's obviously skewed toward the very, very wealthy and the very connected. And I think
and by the way, and he made sure that a very wealthy, very connected person got, quote, justice, but not a lot of people, as Ayanna Pressley will tell us, who aren't wealthy and don't have power.
Absolutely, and I hope he still will before he's out.
I hope so too.
Pardon a lot more people that were caught up because they are poor or people of color or their defense was lousy or whatever. But I mean, I think the uproar over the pardon.
Okay, so let's get back to the topic. Is this immorality that, with the exception of Gates and maybe Hegseth, who may not be confirmed either, it's unclear, he may actually have to pull out, according to the Wall Street Journal, is it going to trickle down to our society at large?
I want to know, Jim, have you ever had to be carried back to your room after being too sloshed at a strip club?
Can I tell you something? If you were too sloshed at a strip club to walk home, you probably don't remember being too sloshed at a strip club.
Oh, yeah, we forgot about that. That he was restrained from dancing on the stage with the strippers. I mean, how many of it? Think about it. We know a lot of people that did a lot of crazy things, but I don't know that many people, like in their 20s and 30s and going into their 40s, had to be repeatedly carried back to their room at events with their office workers. I mean, that would be considered as fit to run an organization, unless they gotten sober and gone to AA and straightened their lives out. There's no indication that Mr. Hegseth has done any of those things.
The only indication is he is incredibly competent at impregnation. That is a great skill.
But you know what you have to say about Donald Trump? He picks a good-looking crew. If you look at his nominees for the cabinet lined up, I mean, he talked about out of central casting his first time around. These are not only out of central casting. I mean, they could have starred.
They're TV performers.
They're absolutely. They're a really good-looking bunch. I'll say that.
Okay, so obviously we're talking about two different things. Marjorie just wants to ridicule the picks, which is fine. I want to talk. I'm serious about what kind of message this sends when essentially, not everybody. There's some honorable, decent people who are nominated here. But when you have the Gateses and the Hegseths and the Patels and the Musks and the RFK
Pam
Juniors,
Bondi.
What's the message? Well, because she took a contribution.
Yes, she was going after, and as people may recall, that before he was the president-elect, Trump was fined $25 million for defrauding students at the bogus Trump University, and she was going after him too for that when she was the Attorney General in Florida, and then she got a $25,000 contribution from the president, and that was the end of her investigation. So I would say she is compromised to be the chief law enforcement officer of the land, but as far as we know, she's not been carried back to her room.
Speaking of carried back, before we get to your calls, I don't know, one of our coworkers sent us this note. Remember Aiden last year at the Gold Dust Orphans? By the way, Ryan Landry, the Gold Dust Orphans, opens tonight. Yep. You should check it out. We'll tell you what the website is later. We all had to carry him home. Maybe he should be Secretary of Defense. I don't know if we had to carry him home. 877
I don't remember that.
301-897. By the way, if you want to do the Marjorie thing and just trash some of these picks, I guess that's okay. But I at least like you to weigh in on the notion about whether or not this is going to have an effect on the morality of a nation when its leaders, or at least a lot of its leaders. And by the way, we didn't mention J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance thinks the guy who he praised and campaigned for was Hitler a year ago, and now he's the appropriate choice to be the leader of the free world. George in Danvers, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going insane.
Yeah.
I live by a couple of the, my grandmother's old sayings. You lead by example, right?
Exactly.
And a couple bad apples ruin the bunch. Mm-hmm. And I can probably go on about that.
Well, you don't have to, but it's okay.
as I agree with you that the trickle-down effect is already happening. I mean, we got a bunch of people who are pretty much do anything, say anything, and get away with anything. You know, I learned from football coaches and school teachers, you lead by example. And this is the example we're setting.
You know, George, you made a really good point that is obvious that I jumped over. It has already trickled down. It's trickled down into the cabinet picks. And that's a brilliant and obvious point, and I'm really glad you made it. And George, thank you much for your call. Woody, the UPS driver, texted Marjorie.
Yeah.
He said if Pete Hegseth does pull out, it'll be the first time. 877 I didn't say it. Woody, the UPS driver, said 877-301 8097. Well, answer my damn question here.
What?
What do you think the impact is of this umbrella of immorality taking over Washington?
It's just like when Bill Clinton said he didn't have sex with that woman back in the 90s, and all these parents were reduced to telling their children that doing what Bill did with Monica Lewinsky was indeed a sexual kind of thing that went on there, and we had to explain, different sex acts back in those days. So there was a trickle-down effect there where your kids would say, "Oh, I'm not having sex when they're doing what Bill and she did." So you know what I mean?
So the answer is you do worry about it?
I think it does. I think it does trickle down. I mean, we talked about this before, but remember the olden days when, the guy, Ginsburg, the guy that smoked pot in college, he got knocked off in his efforts to get onto the Supreme Court. Zoe Baird, of course, didn't know she was supposed to pay taxes, unemployment taxes to her nanny. She got knocked off the Supreme Court. I mean, like I said, it's nothing like having to be restrained from dancing with strippers. I mean, this guy is nothing if not colorful. I'll say that for him.
877-301-8970 is our number. Megan, you're in Fall River. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you so much.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. How are you?
Oh,
excellent.
Good.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you guys.
We're happy to have you, too.
So my husband is a principal at a high school.
Oh, great.
Or vice principal, rather.
Great.
And he had me almost in tears the other night because he was talking about students who have been saying, "Oh, he's illegal," and all this sort of racial issues at the school. And one kid in particular was saying this, and rather than discipline the kid, my husband said, "Well, why don't we do some just sort of a teaching on it with the teaching on race and kind of go over some things and relearn language and just spend some time outside of class doing that." And the mother came in and she lost her mind and she said, "My kid is not doing that. And he's not saying anything wrong. This is what the president's saying. So this is right." And I know you weren't speaking specifically about the president, but you were speaking about the cabinet members. But the same sort of thing. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things people have talked about is that people who kept their feelings about race or racism to themselves have kind of been freed up to speak about them more openly since Trump became the president.
Megan, I'm really glad you shared that story. Thank you.
Listen
Good for your husband. Thanks for the call.
Oh, what happened to Vicky in New Bedford? You got to move the screen a little bit, you guys, so I can see the bottom. Thank you. I believe some MAGA voters don't have a problem with the sexual behavior because it's how they behave. My father is a serial philanderer and misogynist and MAGA. I'm afraid to take a DNA test because who knows how many siblings I have.
Oh, my God.
That is a great point, Vicky, from New Bedford. I hadn't thought about that. You got to watch out for those sibling considerations.
Okay, by the way, since we have read, I think in the spirit of fairness, since we've read extensively from Pete Hegseth's mother in an email to her son saying what a slime ball he was, she is trying to rehabilitate that same man's image. She is on Fox News with Steve Doocy this morning. Here's what Hegseth's mom had to say.
We all believe in him. We really believe that he is not that man he was 7 years ago. I'm not that mother. And I hope people will hear that story today. I am here to tell the truth to the American people and tell the truth to the senators on the Hill, especially our female senators. I really hope that you will not listen to the media and that you will listen to Pete.
Oh, they cut out the most important line.
What?
He goes on to say, and we did a calculation, he has not impregnated anybody who's not his wife in weeks. So, I mean, he's a new man.
Here's the problem, Mrs. Hegseth, and by the way, she did say that she has no respect for a man like her son who belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, uses women for his own power. And Eco, you are that man, she said to her son. You know, she can claim 7 years later that he's a better person.
Sure.
But it's just like we used to talk about during the Me Too moment. Are you guilty for life? Should you have to pay a life sentence if you're Bill O'Reilly and made these loofah sponge gropes and were after these women that work for you or all these other people who do these things? No, you don't have to pay a life sentence. But it doesn't mean you're entitled to one of the most powerful jobs in the country. I think we have to have higher standards.
Well, except I don't even think you have to go. I agree with you as far as you do. There is no evidence that I've heard yet that he has changed his behavior. Have you? That this is a course of conduct he's engaged in for years and years and years and years. So
I have not heard it. The guy obviously had, and maybe he doesn't anymore, but he had a pretty serious drinking problem. Because I say, you know, 1 or 2 times carried back to your room, you can say, okay, I had a bad night. Maybe I mixed some aspirin with my scotch or something. But it's going to be multiple times, and that's a concern. And again, presuming you're sober when you're running the organizations into the ground, you have to say, how many organizations can you run into the ground?
Did you read the story on Drudge about his Fox News colleagues, which is his last job until whatever, a few weeks ago? Talking about how he had they're really concerned about his drinking problem.
Oh, yeah.
At Fox. So the point is, this is not something that happened a decade or so ago that is where he is a change behavior kind of thing. His obligation, should there ever be a hearing, which I can't imagine there's going to be. I mean, when Lindsey Graham, who is the most sycophantic supporter of Donald Trump maybe there is, said to his credit yesterday, there's serious concerns with what he's heard so far. And he said, Pete will have an opportunity, I've known him for a long time, to respond to this. Then you know that the problems are deep. 877-301-8970. John in Westford, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for calling.
Yeah. When I heard that from Lindsey Graham, I mean, that made me like Pete Hegseth even better.
Oh, what did Lindsey say?
That Lindsey, he's the biggest deep state warmonger neocon there is, and he's a sellout. If you ask most conservatives or anybody MAGA, they can't stand Lindsey Graham.
Well, there's one guy, there's one guy in MAGA that would speak highly of him. It's the President of the United States.
Yeah, I'm sure not behind closed doors, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I don't know what happens behind closed doors.
But the amount of hypocrisy, if you read the mother's follow-up text, you know, I was just texting out of anger. I don't mean any of it.
John, you're a really good caller, but you're stating something that is not true. She said she sent a follow-up email. She said to the New York Times she would consider providing it, and she never did. And if she never did, isn't it reasonable to assume she never sent that follow-up email apologizing for her behavior? Otherwise, why doesn't she produce it?
I don't know. Maybe she will. But the question is, like, he shows up to work hungover. Nobody will actually come forward. It's just all anonymous. Everything is anonymous. The hypocrisy is, look at Tara Reid. Nobody believes Tara Reid about what happened to her.
With Joe Biden, yeah. Well, by the way, John, I got to correct you again. When you said everything's anonymous, Margaret Hoover is a serious conservative who was seriously involved in one of the veterans organizations that he was kicked out of, and she, on television, spoke to the problems that led to his ousting. So, I mean, respectfully, John, it's not anonymous.
John, you got to look into Tara Reid. There's a lot of very sad reporting about her very serious issues, including being a serial liar about a lot of things. So I don't know that she was most credible. It's usually not one woman, it's many women. And people have talked about Biden touching people's hair and stuff like that, but it's really rare, especially when you're Biden's age. If it's just one woman, you should do a little bit of research on that. And the other thing about
John, don't go away yet, please.
Jane Mayer, the reporter for The New Yorker, is probably one of the greatest reporters alive today, and she uncovered all this stuff about Clarence Thomas and a lot of other Supreme Court people that it's all been verified and proven true. So I get you'd rather have sources on the record, But unfortunately, and I've been a reporter all my life, that lots of people won't tell you the truth on the record. But what you do when you have anonymous sources is you verify it with other people. So I would take anything Jane Mayer writes to the bank.
John,
she's proven herself.
But answer, if you don't mind, before you leave. Are you concerned, though, about the impact of people who do have these histories, Gates and others? And what is a fact that you can't dispute is there was a settlement against the woman who said she raped him in the Hexas case. Are you worried about that affecting how normal people live their lives in this country?
Well, I think half of the Senate has had settlements. They even have a slush on for it, for these nuisance suits. And I mean, there's so many instances, even like Hillary saying that woman, when she knew darn well that her husband is a predator, and she allowed it to go on and on and on, but yet it's totally washed. Even Anthony Blinken with the Penn State, the millions of dollars that they've extorted from China.
By the way, John, thank you for that. It's not washed. We have talked.
Well,
Marjorie
John,
and I have talked.
He's right about Hillary Clinton.
Not on this show. He's not right about Hillary.
She did disgrace herself, and many people have called her on disgracing herself. She trashed Monica Lewinsky, and so did a lot of Clinton's people that work for him, talking about, you put $1 in a trailer park and drive. That was a disgrace.
But you and I and you in writing when you're in the Herald, and we on the show have made clear we believe the charges against Clinton by these women are credible. Yeah. John, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
But I do want to say one thing that has apparently been proven untrue. The federal investigation into RFK Jr., with the whale carcass on top of his car, apparently.
What was untrue?
Well, I don't think that the charges determine the allegation that he chopped off the head of a whale and carried it on the roof of his car.
He didn't?
I don't know where he was going. He had the carcass of the little cub, the bear cub. He dropped that in Central Park.
He did.
But
he admits that.
He admits that, but there had been an investigation, and apparently the whale carcass story is not true.
Do you know where the whale carcass story came from?
I do not know.
His daughter.
His daughter. Oh, his daughter, Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah. We got to take a break, Marjorie.
We have to take a break. But we're talking about the essential question is how many ridiculous offenses can you commit and still get some of the most important jobs in the United States of America, having to be carried home from your room multiple times, trying to dance with strippers on the top. Kash Patel, some of his merchandise is really kind of bizarre. He sells all this merchandise.
I know he does.
Yeah, Fight with Kash Patel, hoodies, socks, flags, thermoses, and a $250 steel wall art of an orange Punisher skull with Trump-style hair. That's what he's done. He's made a lot of money on the side from his association with Donald Trump.
Remember the part about we have to take a break?
We have to take a break. That's right. We'll be right back to continue this discussion. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for Director of National Intelligence has raised some eyebrows.
There is actually nothing in Tulsi Gabbard's resume that suggests high-level engagement in intelligence matters.
What her nomination means for America's relationship with its allies, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Johnson & Wales University. From computer science to public health, students can develop professional networks and industry experience alongside their classroom education. More at jwu.edu. And Revision Energy. Sunbug Solar is now part of Revision Energy, a solar installer committed to being a renewable energy partner for New England and working to fight climate change. Learn more at sunbugsolar.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island will join us in about 5 minutes. Congresswoman Pressley will join us at 1:30. We're back at the library on Friday. Our text prompt, and these are when we read some of your texts at 12:55 before the 1 o'clock news, at 877-301-8970. Massachusetts legislators say they've done, quote, historic work this session, but they're also least effective at lawmaking of all 50 state legislatures, enacting just 0.2% of all bills introduced. So, can two truths hold at once since they rate themselves highly? How would you rate Beacon Hill's performance this year. Text us at 877-301-8970. But in the interim, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about Donald Trump's, debaucherous delegation of nominees to his cabinet. Some of them, by the way, for all the peril clutching from conservatives about sexual deviancy and left. Many of Trump's picks for the administration have lengthy records of alleged sexual crimes, abuse, etc. Is this going to trickle down and have an effect on how normal people live their lives in this country? I think the name is Dana. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And Lynn, you're next. Hi.
Yes. Hi, Jim and Marjorie. How are ya?
We're good. Thank you for the call. What's up?
Love you both.
Thank you.
Talk about trickle down. I don't recognize myself since the election.
How so?
Liberal. Some would call me a church lady.
Mm-hmm.
But in the past 4 weeks, I've done some, let's say, questionable behavior.
Oh, do tell, Dana. What'd you do?
All right. 3 weeks ago, I went to the dentist.
Yeah.
And I took a magazine. Now, I just stuck it in my purse and walked away.
That is
and
really
yesterday,
bad.
I was in Central Square, and I couldn't add money to my Charlie card to get on the train.
So you just got on?
I shadowed someone and got in. It's terrible.
By the way, I want you to know I have bad news, Dana.
Yeah.
Kash Patel just texted and wants your cell phone number. So you might be in a little bit of trouble there. So, Dana, were you a law-abiding citizen prior to November 5th? And you just
absolutely was.
You were, and everything's changed.
There you go.
It was. It's a sad turn of events.
It is sad. It
Dana,
is very sad.
Take back the magazine. Thank you very much for your... Don't you love how the dentists rip off their home address from the magazines?
I know, they do that. Isn't that true?
They don't trust you not to come to their house.
But Lisa Woburn is basically saying, she agrees with what Dana said, not because what she's done, but the saying, your body, my choice, hit social media the day after the election. So, yes, this kind of thinking has trickled down. Trump claims he's going to protect women. These are the types of men we need protection from, says Lisa in Woburn.
On a serious note, and sadly, a lot of this discussion has not been serious enough here. If you are a kid who's a fairly creative kid and you get in trouble and your parents call you in for misbehaving, wouldn't a creative kid say exactly what we're talking about? I'm doing nothing even close to as bad as Pete Hegseth or Donald Trump or Matt Gaetz, so mom and dad sort of back off kind of thing.
A lot of people who voted for Trump, you heard them in interviews saying they didn't want a pastor, they didn't want a father figure, they wanted someone who's going to lower the price of living and secure the border. So I guess those people would have conversations and say, our politicians are not our role models. Mom and dad are role models. I guess that's what they would do, although maybe someone who feels that way could call us and tell them themselves.
We have time for just one more call. Steve in a car. Hi.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Driving on 93.
Thank you.
I'd like, number one, yes, trickle down. Of course it's going to trickle down. But the second point is that conservatives, GOP, MAGA Nation has all run against woke DEI because unqualified, incompetent people may advance to positions of authority. And then you look at Trump's cabinet, and every one of them lack experience. They're unqualified. They've demonstrated that they are incompetent. So it seems highly hypocritical for them to run on this platform, get in power, and put people at the pinnacle of authority and power in government that have demonstrated that they're unqualified, they're inexperienced. That's my comment.
The only thing I'd say, Steve, I think there are some in this group who are competent,
Rubio,
who are respectful, Secretary of Treasury, some others. I mean, there are some who I think don't fit your negative characterization.
Has been carried back to their room
Passed
after a
out
while
drunk. That's true.
at the strip club.
Great point. Steve, thanks for the call. Thank you all for your calls and texts.
Okay. We are moving on now. We are going to be, where are we going next?
We're joined by Senator Whitehouse.
Oh, my goodness, Senator Whitehouse. That's right.
No,
this is
big surprise for you.
A serious person coming next. Okay, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island is going to zoom in, listen to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted local news. I'm Arun Roth. A recent study found that Mattapan has the city's highest rate of obesity.
And so they created the Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition.
This week's honoree for the Joy Beat. It's all about changing health outcomes.
As an organization, we are just trying to serve the people, right? And so it was decided that we would run the community's first farmers market.
Dedicated to what matters to you. GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan with Medicare Advantage plans featuring a new flexible benefits card to cover fitness and weight loss programs, healthcare transportation, and over-the-counter healthcare needs. mgbadvantage.org. And Revels. Audiences of all ages can experience the Celtic and Cabo Verdean celebration of the solstice at the 54th Midwinter Revels, December 13th through 28th at Sanders Theater, Harvard University. Tickets at revels.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Congresswoman Pressley will join us at about 1:30, and we will be back here on Friday. Our text prompt of the day, we'll read some of them at 12:55 at 877-301-8970. Massachusetts state legislative leaders say they've done, quote, historic work this session. They've also been rated the least effective at lawmaking of all 50 states. So that's how they rate their performance. How would you rate it as the session nears an end? Text us your thoughts at 877-301-8970. Right now we're joined on Zoom by Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. The senator is the chair of the Senate Budget Committee and the Caucus on International Narcotics Control. Also serves as a senior member of the Judiciary Committee, the Environment and Public Works Committee, and the Finance Committee. And perhaps most important to us, at least on the show, Senator has coined the phrase Marjorie cannot stop repeating. How far will Republicans crawl to prove their fealty to Trump? Senator Whitehouse, it's good to see you.
Thank you. Wonderful to actually see you guys. Usually it's a radio thing, but now I can actually see you.
I know.
This is cool.
It's great. We're on YouTube. It's very exciting. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. But Jim did mention, I loved a few weeks ago when you talked about Republicans crawling for Donald Trump. And we just talked with our listeners about kind of a motley crew, including the latest on Hegseth, the guy that the president-elect wants to run the Pentagon, having to be carried back to his room, and the sexual assault allegations and stuff. So how much crawling do you anticipate seeing by the Republicans when and if these people do get into the Senate for hearings?
It's a little hard to tell. I think at the end of the day, many of them are going to have to face their own voters, and they want to be careful about what they sign on to and vote for. The fact that Matt Gaetz had to withdraw shows that there is a bar that they will not go below, but it was an intensely low bar. I mean, Trump wanted our law enforcement apparatus to be run by a person whose only experience with criminal investigations was to be the subject of them. So, kind of hard to stretch that one. I think that Gabbard and Patel and Hegseth are all going to push the boundary. And just to explain to people who are listening, there's this legend of a foreign potentate who had a 2-foot-high door built for anybody who came as a supplicant to try to get favors from him, so that they had to come in crawling. And that's the example that I use when I try to explain why it is that Trump would pick these really grotesque nominees. Their grotesqueness is not a bug. It's a feature. It's how he pushes his Republican senators to prove that they will crawl for him. And once they've crawled for Hegseth or once they've crawled for Patel, he knows they'll crawl for other people. And that expands the power of, kind of autocratic power that he's pushing.
The thing that exposed them most and the hypocrisy of some of your Republican colleagues is when they could vote in secret, they picked as their leader the least trumped up one of the three candidates. And I'm assuming you'd agree that if Senator Thune was on a public ballot amongst his Republican colleagues, he would not be the Senate leader. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I think there's a question of territoriality that this is the Senate Republican caucus and we're going to make our own damn decisions. And I think that might have actually held in even a public vote, because it wouldn't take, the Trumpsters too long to figure out where the votes were. So I don't know about that. I think there's a measure of some territorial pride to the Senate Republican caucus about keeping the executive folks out of their internal business.
Which means, I assume, that if Trump has a problem with the nominee and he asks his Republican colleagues to go into recess so that they can he can do a recess appointment because of their concern about their senatorial whatever jurisdiction, they'll say no?
One would hope, and certainly there'd be a rush to the courthouse to challenge that, because the ability to put the Senate into recess is designed to solve the problem for when the House and the Senate can't agree on when to close the session out, in which case the president can just call it. And then in that period when the old-fashioned Senate was home and was a 3-day carriage or horse ride from Washington, and you couldn't pull the Senate together to get a vote on a nominee, you had to have a recess appointment rule. But the idea that you can create the recess in order to fill the recess appointment when the Senate is right here, ready to go, able to do its job, willing to do its job, I think that even this captured and creeped up Supreme Court would have trouble with that.
Well, before we get to the Supreme Court, one more crawling question. I just wondered, you heard a lot when Trump was president the first time, that senators or Congress people would quietly talk about how they couldn't stand him, or they didn't believe what he was doing was right, but they voted for it anyway to preserve their positions. I'm wondering if this kind of crawling business is new, because you do have to really stretch it. We mentioned Hegseth before, but like Tulsi Gabbard, that who seems to have an unusual friendship with Assad in Syria, who killed his own people, and be not really adversarial toward Putin and stuff like that. Is there we don't know, I guess, what the limit is? I mean, if they're just going to go ahead.
We'll find out. But I think part of this is as the confirmation process goes forward, it is quite plausible that our allies will let the Senate Intelligence Committee know that if the Director of National Intelligence is Tulsi Gabbard, they're going to have to pull way back the information that they're willing to share with us for fear that it will be spilled to the Assad regime, spilled to Putin and his cronies. And a presentation like that, particularly around the so-called Five Eyes, our core intelligence sharing network of the key countries, that's something that for Republicans to really have to deal with. Because if you own a terrorist attack that takes place on U.S. soil because the Aussies wouldn't share intelligence about what was coming because they thought that Tulsi would blow their sources and methods and put their intelligence operation at risk to serve Putin, now you've got a real scandal on your hands, and the Republicans would own that completely. And so I think they want to be very careful when there are real consequences in the real world where the fear of Trump doesn't necessarily reach.
Well, before we leave that then, on Gabbard, play Nostradamus. If she stays in, she has her hearings, does she get confirmed by the Senate?
I'd be very surprised. Again, I think that this question of, we have terrific agents and they do great work, and we have spectacular technological capabilities, and we get a lot of information through those capabilities, and we're able to find people who can help us secretly in a whole variety of places and provide us really good intelligence. But all of that is just a piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is intelligence sharing among other trusted intelligence agencies and other countries, which dramatically expands our capability. And if that is going to be constrained because they think that she is a walking security risk to their intelligence operations, then that's something that the Senate Intelligence Committee is going to take damned seriously.
You know, we're talking to Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island. Senator, most of our conversations with you have been about the Supreme Court of the United States, particularly the dark money support for a lot of the more radical right nominees. You've talked a lot about the lack of ethical standards, or even at least the lack of enforceability of whatever ethical standards there are. One of the things that's been most troubling to me is every time when push comes to shove, even the weak pronouncements, whether it's the so-called ethics package or a letter about this a few years ago, all three liberal members of the court signed on. And the theory being, experts say, well, it was the best they could get. Doesn't that give cover to the unethical Alitos and Thomases of the world when they subscribe to the same, quote, solution as their other six colleagues?
I don't think it helps much. What did help was when two of them said publicly, we should do more. There's no reason we can't do more. Nothing prevents us having an inbox for ethics complaints. Nothing prevents us having a fact-finding process for serious and legitimate ethics complaints. And nothing prevents us from setting up a expert panel of senior judges to review the fact-found conduct against the standards and let us know whether we've gone outside the guardrails. So that's pretty straightforward. And as you probably know, I released a report this week that showed that 50 for 50, every single one of the states, which is sovereign in its own state judiciary, has looked at the problem of how you provide accountability for the members of the highest court in the state, and every one has found a solution. So the pretense from this court that this is somehow like super hard or creates massive separation of powers concerns that are really difficult to work through is just the bunk. It's just ridiculous. It's not true. And so, I hope that report will push the court to move a little bit, and those two and other judges to say, look, we got to do this. We're the only 9 people in the entire United States government whose conduct is not subject to fact finding. We get to make up what we did, and nobody can test whether we're telling the truth or not. That's just a ridiculous standard. And it's a particularly ridiculous standard for the highest court in the land that's supposed to defend rule of law and is violating simple rule of law, which is that you do neutral fact finding.
If one starts with the assumption, as I do, that much of this court is corrupt and clearly anti-majoritarian, are they emboldened to be even more rogue-like because of the Republican clean sweep in Washington? How do you think that'll manifest itself?
Totally. Well, if we had only held the House, then I believe the House was prepared to do really serious investigative hearings into the capture of the Supreme Court, to put like a January 6th commission together and look at this mess. Look at the $500 million plus that was spent to capture the court. Look at how the Kavanaugh report by the FBI was compromised. Prepare for a really serious subpoenaed interview with Leonard Leo about all of the different machinations that he and the Federalist Society went through, probably with the Koch brothers, to plant these people on the court. Tell that whole story. That would have been a really, really big deal. And now that's going to be postponed until after 26 at a minimum. Also, my bill on Supreme Court ethics is certainly going to go no place, whereas if we'd won the trifecta, that would be like top of the agenda.
Senator, you just mentioned the compromised FBI investigation of Justice Kavanaugh before he was put on the court. For people that don't know, tell us what we found since he was put on the court about that investigation.
So here's what happened. The first thing is that the president said that the FBI had free rein to investigate as it wanted to, and the head of the FBI said that they were completely following standard FBI protocol and procedure. Both statements were false. The first one was false because the White House was dramatically constraining what the FBI could do. The second was false because there are, in fact, no FBI procedures related to a supplemental background investigation, which this was, other than do exactly what the White House tells you. So there was a big lie around it. Within that was the smaller lie that the tip line that they used to take tips after they tried to avoid getting any information at all, the FBI never investigated any tip that came in, ever, not one. And hundreds, if not thousands, came in. What they did was they sorted them from the general tip line stuff that had nothing to do with Kavanaugh, and they sent them all up to the White House to be looked at up there. So if anything, what the tip line did is identified for the White House who the FBI should be told not to go and interview because they actually knew something bad. And then the last thing is, as we saw in the votes, all the Republicans said, well, there's no corroboration. We're really concerned about her testimony, but there's no corroboration. Well, the FBI was instructed not to pursue corroborating evidence, only direct evidence. So it was a self-dealing situation of not producing corroboration and then having the Republicans all jump in and say, yeah, of course there was no corroboration. They were told not to go out and get it.
Senator Whitehouse, I haven't seen what you've said, or I couldn't find what position you've taken on President Biden's decision to pardon his son. What is your position?
I haven't, and I don't tend to pile on at this point. There's plenty that's been said about that, and it's going to continue to be chattered about, but that's not something I'm going to dive in on. Are you worried about already Mayor Adams is saying, I feel just like in New York City, I feel the reason I'm being prosecuted is because of the same bias and politicization that Joe Biden was talking about in his own, not to mention Donald Trump? There is no doubt that the excuse President Biden gave was a very unfortunate one, which is to blame it on his own DOJ and feed into the whole DOJ deep state narrative that we're going to hear about in the Bondi and Patel confirmation hearings. The obvious thing I thought to say would be, I had no plans to give my son a pardon until I saw that Matt Gaetz was the kind of person that they were looking at for Attorney General. Yeah. And Pam Bondi was the kind of person they were looking at for Attorney General. And Kash Patel was the kind of person they were looking for the FBI. These are people who would glory in pulling the wings off flies if they were the right flies. And I'm not going to subject my son to completely phony baloney Department of Justice leadership like this, because they would just come after him, and that's what's new, and that's what's different, and that's what I'm objecting to.
Well, I'm glad you're not taking a position on that. Now, Senator Whitehouse, if we can, for a second, we talk a lot about climate on the show, and we complained almost every day of the 100-plus day campaign of Kamala Harris. There was not enough climate talk. I think you agree. You just came back from COP29 in Azerbaijan, which from a long distance seems to us have been an abject failure. Are we being...
It was.
Okay. Give us a sense
Correct.
of what's your takeaway?
Abject failure. Nothing serious got accomplished. No trajectory change in our emissions profile. I think if you're going to look for good news, you have to look elsewhere than Baku and that COP. I think that if there's good news on the horizon, it's the European Union's CBAM, their carbon border adjustment mechanism, which will apply a carbon price for all imports into the EU. The UK is joining it, so they're actually combined. All imports into the EU and UK will be tariffed for their carbon intensity if it's worse than the EU and the UK. Australia's in the last stages of negotiation to join in itself. And that puts immense pressure on the U.S. to add its own carbon tariff, or else have our companies exporting to the EU and the UK and Australia have to start paying tariffs because we have been, so laggard about taking care of the climate problem. So that's going to put, I think, a lot of pressure on Congress in a good way to add our own carbon border tariff so that we're not hurting our own companies by importing highly carbon intense polluting stuff from other countries, and then B, get out from under the hook of the EU and UK tariffs by having our own internal carbon price, which is what the EU negotiators have said they're going to demand. So if that works out, a pathway to climate safety begins to emerge.
Well, so I know you may not be, a lot's been written about what the Democrats did wrong or why Trump won this last election, but you did mention what Jim just said, that we didn't talk enough about climate. Anything else the Democrats should have done, you think, that might have helped?
Well, my personal theory is that three of the biggest things that are happening in America right now, really bad things. One is the intrusion of dark money into our politics that has created massive amounts of political corruption. The second is the success of the really creepy, crooked climate denial operation that the fossil fuel industry has run, largely using that corrupting dark money, by the way. And the third is the capture of the Supreme Court to be turned into a tool of a bunch of right-wing billionaire oligarchs and their front groups and all the people that flock around the court. And all of it is connected by the same creepy billionaires and the same dark money. And all of it is really dramatically harmful to the integrity of our judicial system, to the integrity of our planet, and to the integrity of our political system. And we basically have given the creepy billionaires and all their front groups, that whole ecosystem that they run, a complete pass politically by raising zero of those issues in any kind of a comprehensive or meaningful way in our politics.
So are you hopeful that your colleagues in the party get it after the fact? Or you go ahead.
Sometimes it takes, the 2x4 upside the head. This election, I think, was potentially a 2x4 upside the head. I think particularly also on climate, the fact that what's been predicted for so long is now actually coming true in real time and causing things like insurance collapse for homeowners in Florida. We are now entering the era of climate consequences. And as those play out in people's lives, when you can't get homeowners insurance in Florida, when it's 4 times what it used to be, when you can't even get your car insured in Oklahoma because of the hail, all of that kind of stuff, that starts to hit people right in their pocketbooks, right when they're trying to pay bills at the kitchen table. And I think that era of consequence after our era of political failure is going to be an attention getter. It's going to be another 2x4 upside the head.
We only have 30 seconds left. We failed to congratulate you, by the way, on your re-election. So congratulations. One last thing. Jill, watching on YouTube, and a bunch of other people are in touch with us. They want to know why there's a shark over your left shoulder on the wall behind you. Can you tell us briefly why?
I care a lot about oceans, which are now being heated, thanks to climate change, by zettajoules. Look it up. Okay. It's got 21 zeros after it. It's a massive, massive number. We're transforming our oceans for the worst. And I actually took that photograph.
Oh, my
wow.
God. Well, we'll continue that part of the conversation next time.
He's an explorer, too, underwater explorer.
Senator, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Senator, for being with us.
Hope you join us
really
again
appreciate
soon.
it.
Thank you.
That was Senator Sheldon.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. Every story has its twists and turns, so let the PBS NewsHour set the record straight. Get the facts you need from America's most trusted news source. Don't miss the PBS NewsHour, weeknights at 6 on GBH2.
I'm Deputy Investigative Editor Jennifer McKim, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Lakshmi Singh. New York City police confirmed the deadly attack on United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson early this morning was not random. At a news conference a short time ago, Commissioner Jessica Tisch said the 50-year-old executive was targeted.
The victim was in New York City to speak at an investor conference. It appears the suspect was lying in wait for several minutes.
Police are asking the public to help them catch the suspect. They have raised the reward for capture to up to $10,000. The police commissioner also sought to quell any public concerns about security surrounding today's tree lighting and other holiday events. while Thompson's killer is at large. Meanwhile, United Healthcare Group has just released a statement about Thompson's death, saying Thompson was a, quote, highly respected colleague and friend to all who worked with him. The U.S. Supreme Court is considering arguments in a case testing whether states may ban minors from accessing gender-affirming care. NPR's Nina Totenberg has details.
In the last 3 years, 25 states have enacted bans or otherwise restricted access to puberty blockers and hormones for minors seeking to change their sex. State Senator Jack Johnson is one of the sponsors of the Tennessee law that's now before the court.
We felt like this was the best public policy to prevent kids from suffering from irreversible consequences, things that cannot be undone.
But those challenging the law counter that the state discriminates based on sex because the same medications the state bans for gender dysphoria are permitted to treat minors for many other conditions. Nina Totenberg, NPR News, Washington.
Debate is underway in the French Parliament over whether to oust the Prime Minister and his government. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports the lower house will vote on no-confidence motions filed by the far-right and far-left parties.
Parliament members from the center accuse their colleagues on the extremes of being agents of chaos. Parties on the far left and far right say the government's budget, pushed through as an emergency measure without the support of Parliament, hurts the working class. No single party in the fragmented French Parliament has a majority, but the two extremes hold the largest voting blocs. If the no-confidence motion passes, Prime Minister Michel Barnier's government will fall. France could be plunged into political uncertainty as soon as this evening. If the government falls, President Emmanuel Macron will have to find a new prime minister, but the parliamentary divisions will remain. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 224 points, or roughly 0.5% at 44,929. This is NPR. General Motors is writing off billions of dollars worth of investments in China. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on the automaker's latest warning.
GM says its joint ventures in China are not living up to expectations. It plans to write down the value of those projects by more than $2.5 billion next year. The automaker will also record a $2.7 billion restructuring charge, reducing its fourth quarter income. Stock in Salesforce jumped after the business software maker reported better than expected sales and gave an upbeat forecast for its new artificial intelligence offerings. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
A small North Carolina town is suing one of the country's largest utilities over climate change. NPR's Jeff Brady reports Scarborough, North Carolina says Duke Energy has known for decades that its fossil fuel power plants were warming the planet.
Scarborough, North Carolina is a town of 21,000. It says it expects up to $60 million in climate-related costs in coming years. That includes flood recovery, road repairs, and higher utility bills for air conditioning. Mayor Barbara Foushee says Duke Energy learned about climate change in the late 1960s, but chose to publicly cast doubt over the science.
We are squarely focused on the deception, the damages, and the fact it's going to get worse, and we need to protect our community from future harms.
Duke Energy says it now has a plan to eliminate climate pollution from power plants by 2050. Jeff Brady, NPR News.
The Dow is up 217 points. The Nasdaq has risen 189. It's NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Auto Insurance protects the vehicles that work to keep small businesses moving forward, including protection while running errands and other tasks, at progressivecommercial.com.
He's Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Representative Ayanna Pressley is going to join us at 1:30 this afternoon. Jim and I will be back here on Friday. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. Our text prompt of the day, remember we read some of these at 12:55 right before the 1 o'clock news. You text us at 877-301-8970. Massachusetts state legislative leaders have said in the last few days they've done historic work this session, but they've also been rated the least effective legislature in America. So that's how they feel about themselves. How would you rate their performance as this session draws to an end? Text us your thoughts, 877-301-8970. We're joined now by national security expert Juliette Kayyem. Juliette's a former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under Barack Obama and the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School, contributing writer as well to The Atlantic. Hello, Juliette.
Hello.
Hey, Juliette.
Hi, everyone.
Good to see you.
Juliette,
Yeah.
CNN, where we see you as a contributor all the time, is now reporting that United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was fatally shot. Apparently the gunman's gun jammed, he reloaded, and then shot Thompson in the back and killed him. This happened in Midtown Manhattan.
Yeah.
What else do we know?
I mean, we know it's premeditated. He was masked. He was armed. His gun jammed. He was sufficiently trained.
Could you move your mic up just an inch?
Understood enough.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, that's
The
good.
producer was
That's good.
flinching. So.
Hello.
Hello. Start again. It was premeditated. He was masked. Waiting out a United Healthcare event where he knew the CEO would be. This is pretty scary. I have a lot of people a lot of friends who are in executive protection. Most companies are going to be ratcheting up until they understand a motive. And there's a gazillion at this stage, but we know it's not random, right? That's the one motive we know it's not, just given the place and the manner. Is it a personal thing? Is it related? Is it a disgruntled employee or ex-employee, or is it someone impacted by United Healthcare who goes after the CEO? The last, to me, is the scariest because every CEO is in the service industry, and if you're in the service industry, someone is pissed off at you.
You know, as this society on some levels, not overall violent crime, I believe, is doing pretty well in this. Well, pretty well is a stupid expression to use, but the numbers are fairly decent. But people in positions of power have tons of threats. I mean, we intended, when we just had Senator Whitehouse with us from Rhode Island, we intended to end with a discussion about bomb threats he got on Thanksgiving. We just didn't have enough time. A number of the nominees to Trump's cabinet have gotten death threats the last few days. I've always wondered, I don't think we've ever discussed this with you, when you're a high-level business executive making a ton of dough and running a huge operation that affects zillions of people, some in ways that don't make them happy, do they have
Yes, it's a division within most major companies called executive protection that's not talked about a lot. You can read about it. It's not like it's a secret. It is just a group of people who are determining the whereabouts and the safety of, in particular, the CEO, but it could be any number of people. It's called executive protection. They're at the house. They're there on travel. They're making sure.
Is it likely that Thompson had people with him?
I'm shocked at this. Yes, it's likely that he had, but he's probably getting from his car into the building. The one thing that just from my experience that I'm looking at, so I'm not conjecturing, just it was at 6:30 in the morning. That means the person had knowledge of a potential arrival date, so arrival time. Now, either he might have spent the night, he might have known that he was going to come in at some time, but that's just something to look at. I also. It would be a breach of norm if this is what was advertised or being reported is that it was a United Healthcare sort of stock meeting. Like, in other words, this is going to be your investors, that the CEO would come in through a public means.
Yeah.
Most of them are going to come in through a back room or whatever into the hotel or into the secure area. You don't have them going. So I don't know the details of sort of of his exposure, but that is surprising to me, unless he felt like he wasn't under threat or he waived it for whatever reason.
Well, and does something like this, which is so high profile and so horrible and in broad daylight, I assume that causes reassessment everywhere, right?
Been on, yes.
Oh, is that what you've been?
Yes. I don't do executive protection, but I work with teams, of which a part of it, any company's safety and security division is going to have a piece that is solely dedicated to executive protection because obviously, I mean, this sounds horrible. A human being was killed, and that's a tragedy. There is also. In this world, there is also, business and financial duties to try to keep that person alive because they are the CEO, in this case, of a public company, and a public company that has been under the spotlight recently because of a recent hack where people were impacted. So that's what I would look at as the sort of the recipient of United Healthcare. But once again, it could be a personal thing that we have no knowledge of right now.
We're talking to Juliette Kayyem.
So, Juliette, let's move on to South Korea. President Yoon there declared martial law. There was massive protests in the street. The parliament then lifted the declaration. But what was this all about?
Yeah, the president has been wildly ineffective and also a bit of a lame duck. He is unhappy with a parliament or a legislator that has been pushing up against him, and he panicked. He thought he was more popular than he was. And this came out of the blue for everyone. I mean, South Korea is a relatively new democracy, but it is considered one of the more stable ones. Also, just think of the economic issues involved. It is a thriving economy in Asia. This came out of the blue by most people who follow South Korea. They knew that he was weak, but that this move, in which he would use the military. And remember, this is going to now start to sound familiar to people. He said there were outside threats, North Korea. North Korea is a threat all the time to South Korea. There was nothing new, but also internal threats that were undermining democracy. So he declared insurrection and martial law. And it was an unbelievable thing to watch in real time. The parliament, anyone who can get in, it's kept in. Their staff is keeping the military out because he wasn't in parliament. And then the parliament just starts to do what parliaments do, rightfully, if they have their act together, which is not only overturn the order, but now it's over for him. He's going to be impeached or whatever the equivalent they have of it. It's just been a remarkable 24 hours in that country that no one saw coming. I mean, I think and it's a lesson for us that even the threat. I really believe this. That like South Korea is a weaker democracy. I mean, there was a strength in what they did, but it's a weaker democracy because of what happened over the last 20 to 24 hours. It may emerge as a stronger one, but even the threat of insurrection laws being used against for domestic fights, essentially, is something that we are going to become very familiar with, and we better prepare ourselves.
By the way, the legislature, or the parliament, whatever it's called, voted unanimously, including all the members of his own party, to overturn. One thing that maybe is just me being my usual worrying self. They're a key ally of ours. Israel is a key ally in recent times when Netanyahu has taken major action. He fails to notify his ally, the United States, in advance. My understanding is the president of South Korea did not notify the United States that he was about to declare martial law. Is that just coincidental, or is there a new something?
No, he needed the element of surprise because he needed to essentially, the screw up was that Parliament was able to convene. So I'm not surprised that he didn't, but he's going to face consequences for it. We will not be invested in him staying in power. We will not be. I mean, it is whatever ally he is, it's over for him. And he just doesn't know it yet. But I mean, you're following it in real time. There's now a vote. I mean, he can't survive this. He really misjudged it.
So you go ahead.
Well, you were talking about using the military domestically. Senator Warren has joined U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut about any possibility that President-elect Trump, when he becomes president, would be using the military domestically. So explain why this is such a big deal.
I mean, part of it is sort of people thinking through what's your strategy with the Trump 2.0, and it may be different than strategy than Trump 1.0. What I like to remind people is Trump is not as popular as he thinks he is in terms of the mandate issue, in terms of the popular vote, and even in terms of now that we're seeing the numbers unfold in terms of the House. Lots could happen in the midterm. And so, don't give up. And so part of the strategy is friction. Just create friction in the system. He can ignore it, railroad over it, bulldoze over it, whatever he wants to do. But I thought I liked the letter and the request because we have to begin to memorialize outside the judicial process, which may not, the legal process, which has not benefited sort of an anti-Trump strategy to a certain extent against him, and begin to put markers down so that they know that Trump is going to come in and waive whatever rules. But I think just to try to memorialize what norms are is going to be very important for, I think, a variety of reasons, including history, how different it is. They know that it's not going to stop Trump. And I think it's more pressing now than even when it was sent yesterday, or 2 days ago, because it is likely, as should be, that Hegweth will not become the Secretary of Defense. He's reported now to be an alcoholic, an abusive alcoholic, a sexually harassing alcoholic. He's not going to survive. And the person...
He has a backup job at a strip club in Florida, by the way.
Exactly. He doesn't have a backup job.
So he's got a good fallback.
He doesn't have a backup job at Fox, that's for sure.
Well, that's probably
because they're
true.
all going after him. Or at least they're leaking news reports. So the next in line appears to be DeSantis. And DeSantis is a governor who is more than happy to use his military, the National Guard, for all sorts of treacherous reasons, including, remember, he sort of allowed the National Guard allowed his National Guard to get involved with elections and election enforcement or protection. So this is the head of the Defense Department is going to have access to the utilization of troops in the homeland that he's sort of used to, right, as a Florida governor. I say this, I just say it. Like, it's not like I like it. It's just like, you got to go into this eyes wide open and stop saying, I can't believe Trump is doing this. Trump is going to do all of this. There's going to be legal remedies. There's going to be public protest remedies because, once all this stuff starts getting done, it is not at all clear whether a man who got below 50% is going to be able to, people will find that a popular thing.
That below 50% thing, by the way, drives me out of my mind.
Say it every day.
It just drives me out of my mind.
Doesn't drive me out of my mind.
He won the House, he won the Senate, he won the plurality, and he won the Electoral College. Okay, but here's what concerns me. I tried to articulate this with Ilan Stavins from Amherst College yesterday. I did a horrible job, so I'm going to try to do it better with you. Here's what I believe that smart people, and there are some smart people in his infrastructure, will do on day one. Not this mass deportation thing where they start separating kids from their families. They have a list, this is conjecture on my part, of the worst criminals who are here illegally. Not the crime of crossing the border, horrible violence. They go into Boston, where there's been a sanctuary city, and a woman who's spoken out against them, Mayor Wu, or into Denver, where Homan, the head of border stuff, has also gotten into it. And they target the most violent migrant they possibly can. And then what does the other side that opposes mass deportation do? What do they do in a situation like that? They have to cooperate, I assume. Yeah. And the message to the American people is the Juliette Kayyems of the world have just been scaring you. Yeah. We're going after the worst of the worst, as we told you we would, at which point America's attention turns to something else, and then they do the bad stuff. Is that a ridiculous scenario?
I think that's I think that is likely what's going to happen. I've been saying that I thought the mass deportations would be sort of performative in the sense that they're going to go after the low-hanging fruit. That's people that are in jail or under some sort of judicial order, and really bad people. And I don't...
no one can defend.
I have no problem. Honestly, I have no problem with that. I've never understood.
I don't think anybody has a problem with that.
And I don't. And when we say that we're a sanctuary city of Boston,
can I interrupt? I'm not articulating the point well. It is an effort to confuse the opponents, basically saying We're not going after average families. We're not separating kids from their parents. And then as soon as our attention goes to the next thing.
That last piece, I'm not sure about, only because, I mean, for a couple reasons. One is, if you think, what are going to be the checks on Trump 2.0? And there's going to be a variety of them, not as strong as the first time. One of them is going to be the business community, who is going to get in his face.
They've been really strong, haven't they?
Well,
nothing.
The farmers, the
California growers,
hospitals,
where have they been?
Oh well, they don't mind him. They just don't want him to
take away their workers.
And he won't. He won't.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay.
I think people are going to be able to draw a distinction.
Who do you think works at Mar-a-Lago?
I want to hear this. Draw a distinction?
Yes, I think people are able to draw a distinction between some person that's in jail that's from another country who raped 5 people and they're going to get rid of him, as opposed to talking about going in and hauling people.
You mean like they drew a distinction when they just reelected somebody who separated kids from their parents and put kids in cages in Texas?
No, I think
they did a really discerning job there.
Well, I think you're talking about 3 different pools, and so I do think 2 are in worse shape, and maybe rightfully so. But so the first pool is people at the border who are coming in unlawfully. I don't think the left or progressives should spend a lot of time on this. For one, I get into a lot of trouble with my party. Asylum has been abused. Like, it cannot be that every person who shows up at the border can claim asylum. It has been abused. Most people who have been in this field know that we have to have reform to asylum laws, and I'm ducking my head, and I'll read your emails later. The second is people who are here who have committed crimes. Again, not a pool that I would stay up late at night for.
Crimes.
Right. And the third is what we call interior enforcement. That's the people.
That's
people
different.
Already in the inside who have stabilized lives and whatever else, either undocumented or documented. That's DACA. I mean, if I were the Dreamers, if I were, I would talk about no other immigrant pool in the United States if I were a progressive advocate than DACA.
And the Dreamers, so people know, are people that came here as children
and
with
wildly
their parents.
Popular.
They were a year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, lived here their whole lives. This is their country. And I do think that there will be a reaction to trying to get rid of those people. There's got to be.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we go? We attempted, when Senator Whitehouse was here, we asked him what his position on the pardon was by Joe Biden, and his position was, I really don't want to pile on. And then after we asked him a follow-up question, he didn't quite pile on.
Yeah.
But he said that this was, I'm putting words in his mouth, but you can listen to it on the podcast. Strategically, it was not the wisest thing.
Juliette's going to rush right home to listen to the podcast.
I was talking to the audience. Sorry. Where are you on this?
It's a hard, I'm going to be totally honest, because I'm normally so opinionated. The night it happened, I was like watching like a tennis game where, tennis ball, where I'm like, oh, I agree with that person. I agree with that person. I agree with that person. I believe a few fundamental truths. One is, I don't think any of this matters to what Trump is going to do in terms of pardons. He's going to pardon the January 6th insurrectionists, or at least most of them. And he was going to do that regardless. Now he has a better narrative, so it's going to have political consequences. He does, because we get so up in arms. The second is, and I can't prove this. I can tweet it, but I can't prove it.
Go ahead.
No, I think it's just like, Trump isn't messing around. I mean, these appointments at the FBI, this appointment at the FBI and others, there's a category of people who are going to have positions of power who have become famous, focused on Hunter Biden. And so, I don't know if it's this happened and then Biden did this, but obviously, the fact that you have an FBI, a DOJ, and a president who are sort of focused on the Biden family, I think that there were intervening circumstances between when Biden said, "I'm not going to do this."
Trump won. That was the intervening circumstance.
The third is, I can't. It is politically bad. The period. It is politically bad. But I am like, I'm not forgiving. I'm not defending Biden when I say this. It's just, we have to look forward. We can piss on, sorry, did I just say that? Oh my God, we can, sorry,
That's all right.
on
Our
Biden as much as we want, because it makes us feel better, and we're mad at him because he didn't get out early enough and now we lost. But let's look forward in the same day, right? And everyone's saying this is, Donald Trump appoints both of his sons-in-laws or both of his daughter's father-in-laws to senior positions. So,
One's a felon, though.
Right,
so
one's a former felon.
Yeah.
So
part
of it is
a brother with a prostitute or
yeah,
something.
He was like his brother-in-law. So I guess the pile-on is like not without its consequences, which is I can't relive everything that Biden or the Democrats did wrong.
Let's look at the future for a second. My understanding is the following, is when you're called before Congress and you don't want to testify and you have pending criminal charges, you take the fifth saying, I have a right not to incriminate myself. Well, now, since he can incriminate himself based on anything he did in the last 11 years, when Jim Jordan, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, subpoenas Hunter Biden to come in and talk about all the things he wouldn't talk about before, whether there's a smoking gun or not, Hunter Biden has to agree to go or potentially go to jail for contempt of Congress, right?
Let me make it clear. Hunter Biden abused his position. He violated federal laws. He was a drug abuser, alcohol abuser, gun possession abuser, used the family name to get all sorts of monetary benefits. Is not someone that I am defending. There's a lot of history in that family. But the idea that the Republicans are going to focus their ire on the son of a about to be a former president, if I were the president, I might have done the same thing. I would have done it differently. Can I just say one thing quickly?
You can say whatever you want.
I thought his statement about it was BS, Biden's.
The DOJ part of it, Department of Justice.
Literally, he could have said it in 3 sentences, which is, I'm ending my career. My family has gone through a lot. They have made mistakes. A court determined that they made mistakes. There's one more thing I can do for my family that has borne the burden of tragedy, exposure, hate, and all of that, and I'm doing this. And I think the temperature would go down. I didn't get the verbal and this and this and this. Why didn't he just write it in a single paragraph?
Well, you know what, the empathy, he still can do something. David Axelrod said, the former advisor to Obama, said on CNN the other night, which I thought was an obvious and wonderful point. If he was going to do this, he should have pardoned a ton of people who were done wrong by the justice system.
I hope he still will.
But Ayanna Pressley is going to join us in an hour and talk about exactly that. It seems to me, if he wants to both mute the impact of pardoning his kid and, more importantly, do the right thing by thousands of people who have been unfairly treated by the justice system, he should use his final 50 or whatever days
should have done it,
to do it now.
I mean, he knew when the sentencing was, so he did it 36 hours before the sentencing on one of the first ones. That date has been out there forever. So, I mean, in other words, we have talked a lot about it. I'm not happy about it. I'm torn about it. But if you were going to do it, I would have done it differently.
But you know what I think about these things? I think, again, it's such an instinctual thing. If you knew your child who had been hounded, done a lot of bad things, absolutely, but hounded, was now facing people who've got knives coming at your child from every single solitary direction. You've lost your wife, you've lost a daughter, the other son just died of brain cancer a few years ago. I think the average person
would have gotten it.
They're saying, absolutely.
So why did he trash his own Justice Department?
I thought it was very bad.
But you're a little bit in the weeds here. I don't think people
Everybody's talking about it.
He's
the
not
mayor
in
of
the
New York
weeds.
City's talking about it.
Is talking about
and Donald Trump and the mayor, the indicted mayor of New York is talking about it.
I just think the average person, if you were going
then
to
why
run
didn't
again,
Biden say that? That's what I don't like. I think we can admit that.
We've all been talking about Biden losing his fastball.
No, he's got advisors. He's a lawyer wrote that. He didn't write it.
I'm with you, Juliette.
I don't know.
I think if you have a 3-sentence saying that, mercy, I think people get mercy.
And you know what the other thing is?
They don't get throwing your
Sure.
own Justice Department under the bus.
But there's one more thing about this, and I've said this before. We have talked for years about the injustice in the justice system. If you're black, if you're poor, if you don't have a good lawyer, and your lawyer's falling asleep, he's not. But the idea that people think that the justice system works well for anybody who isn't rich or doesn't have a lot of money for a lawyer, black or white. I think we can all remember the OJ.
And Joe Biden just proved they're right.
Yeah.
If you're connected, you're white, and you're wealthy, you'll get a deal.
Jim, we didn't need need Joe Biden to prove he was right. We have a guy who tried to overthrow the government, who took his documents to Mar-a-Lago. The justice system failed there. You can blame Merrick Garland, the Attorney General.
I do blame Merrick
Garland. But this idea that, oh my God, until Joe Biden pardoned his son,
I agree with
the
you.
Justice system was a justice system from soup to nuts.
The commentary is ridiculous. Just everyone, as I said, two things to take away. One is Donald Trump is not wildly popular, despite what he's telling you. So everyone buck up.
57% of the people support what he's done in his transition.
Whatever.
57%.
When it comes to voting, he's not wildly popular. He's under 50%. Remember that. I'm trying to give these people some hope.
Remember you, Juliette.
Wrap it up.
I'm with you.
What?
I'm pacing the rage with
Go ahead,
you.
wrap it
Pace
up.
the rage. And now I already, oh my God, isn't that sad? And the second is...
You forgot.
Oh, Donald Trump was going to pardon these January 6th insurrectionists regardless. So don't buy the media narrative, or a lot of the media narrative, that this just gives Trump
woman
license.
Who's in the media on CNN.
I know.
On our show. Okay,
I know.
Okay. Nice to see you, Juliette.
A one-woman show.
I
It's a
think
pleasure.
every word was
Bye.
brilliant, Juliette.
It was
Thank you
fine.
for coming in. We've been speaking.
I'd say she has rather tepid support.
They're
going to
get me on the asylum.
Okay, we've been speaking with National Security expert Juliette Kayyem, a former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and a contributing writer to The Atlantic. And she coined the phrase that I love almost as much as Senator Whitehouse talking about the crawling Republicans, that is, pace the rage.
Whether you're a renter or a homeowner, researchers say everyone is at the mercy of the housing market, but homeowners are facing extra cost spikes.
Homeowners in particular, they are experiencing elevated interest rates, right? And we've also seen insurance costs and other costs associated with homeownership increasing.
Enduring the burdens of high housing costs on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And the School of the Museum of Fine Arts at Tufts University, hosting its annual art event December 6th through the 8th, connecting Boston area art lovers with contemporary art since 1978. Learn more at smfa.tufts.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Bradley. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Congresswoman Pressley will join us in exactly an hour. Marjorie and I are back here with our guests and friends on Friday. Final reminder about our text prompt. Again, we read some of these right before the 1 o'clock news, 877-301-8970. The leaders of the legislature said in the last few days they've done historic work this season, even though they're rated the least effective at lawmaking of all 50 states. That's their self-review. How would you review their performance as they are ending this session in a couple of weeks? Text us 877-301-8970. We're joined now at the library by Christopher Kimball. Chris of Milk Street Kitchen fame, of course, prolific cookbook author, TV host of Milk Street Radio, Sundays at 3 o'clock on 89.7. Basically, multimedia extraordinaire. I forgot the food tours. We'll talk about that, too. His latest book, which is great, is Milk Street Bakes, a baking book with 200 sweet and savory recipes. It's his first baking book, 2 years in the making. Christopher Kimball, it's good to see you. Congratulations again.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So as I mentioned before you went on the air, you have written so many great cookbooks, put them together with the 6 ingredients or fewer ingredients, or the noodle books, all these great things. But this is the first baking book. So why?
That's an excellent question.
I think so. I try to ask excellent questions, Christopher.
This is like a child's Christmas in Wales. He had that line, everything about the wasp, but why? I don't know, something like that.
That's right.
Well, what's interesting is if in the United States, we have some great, layer cakes, we have pies, cobblers, etc. But we have desserts like the English do, puddings, right? Most people in the world don't eat dessert. What they do is they have something during the day, like in the late afternoon with a cup of coffee.
I didn't know that.
So the way they think about desserts is very different. It's not full of sugar, most of them. It's not a multi-layered cake. It tends to be one layer. It might be, flatbread. It might be invisible apple cake from France, where you slice apples very thinly and pour in some cake batter and bake it in a loaf pan. So the way they think about baking is very different than the way we think about it, because they eat it differently. So, things are smaller portions. Danish dream cake, for example, is kind of like a New York style coffee cake with sort of a gooey coconut filling on top. So they just have a different way of putting things together, which is very different than what I'm used to with sort of New England baking.
So that's why you wrote the book? That's why you did that was the question. You thought
it is very different,
fabulous.
Though.
Was that the answer to the question?
Yeah, here, let me give you a specific example.
Please.
I was in the Coyoacán market in Mexico City a few years ago. Early in the morning, it's cold, it's dark. I go in, I was going to film someone making a recipe, of course, and they served me a piece of corn cake. Now, this is kind of halfway between cornbread and cake. It's slightly sweet, slightly corny, kind of velvety texture. And she made it in a blender. She put all the ingredients in a blender and poured it in a pan and baked it. And it was phenomenal. It was like one of my favorite cakes because it's not too sweet. It's got a great texture. But then I said, oh, you can make cakes in a blender, right? So when you come across a recipe like that, you go like, yeah, this is something new for me anyway. And so you find a lot of recipes like that. A phyllo cake in Crete, you take a roll of phyllo, roll it up, cut it into ribbons, toast it in the oven for 15 minutes, and throw it in a big bowl with some batter and bake it up. And you have a cake where the phyllo, there's no flour. It's the phyllo that sort of binds it together. Another recipe that I'd never heard of. So it's about things I've never heard of and I'm excited about.
Yeah, it's very different from the usual American cookbook. That's absolutely.
We do have a chocolate chip cookie there, though.
So can I read you to you? This is your introduction. It has been said that baking is a science. You can play around with a stir fry, but not with Swedish cardamom buns. Does that put more pressure on the baker or less pressure on the baker? As you know, I've modified some of your recipes and I've suffered as a result of it, and you've chastised me for it.
Thank God.
But that was not baking. I made a lemon raspberry olive oil muffins. How were they, Marjorie?
It was delicious, Jim. I was very impressed.
I'm going to give Mr. Kimball one to take with him in a second. So the pressure's on when you're told you got to follow this or you're going to be in trouble. Isn't that the message?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I argue with people about this all the time. Everybody wants to be Jerry Garcia. They want to improvise. Jerry practiced scales 2 hours a day, right?
He did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, everyone did. So the point is that in baking in particular, you need to follow a recipe. When I tell people to follow a recipe, I bet you half the people who cook my recipes don't even read the recipe first. Because it's like, well, I didn't have this, or I didn't have that, or I didn't have regular flour, so I used breadcrumbs, whatever. So in baking, you do have to follow the recipe. Like, follow the recipe the first time, and then if you want to adjust it going forward, that's fine. But somehow people think they're not creative if they follow a recipe. I still follow recipes. There's nothing wrong with that. So in baking in particular, for example, if you use honey versus sugar, that's going to make a difference. A dark pan versus a light pan is going to make a difference. A bottom rack versus a middle rack versus upper rack is going to make a difference. All those things make a difference.
I didn't know that. Bottom versus middle versus top? Because the bottom's hotter.
The bottom's hotter from the bottom, yeah. So if your oven and my oven all different, they're not going to be the same. You set your oven to 350, you do it, I do it. Some will be 320, some will be 370. So there's a lot of imprecision in the environment around baking. That's why you really need to follow a recipe, because if you add that to the mix, like you just substituted something wildly, that's just going to mess it up.
Okay, so let me be critical of your muffin. I would have said,
what are you talking about?
Not that I'm a great cook, because I'm not.
This is why I keep coming back to the show, because I get this kind of feedback.
Because I would have cooked it a little bit less, so it would have been moister. I'm not much.
You told me an hour ago it was like one of the best muffins you ever had.
Well, maybe he just overcooked it.
Well, some people like it.
I actually, in all seriousness, I left it in 2 minutes longer than you said, because I like the top to be brown.
I like
and
it.
crisp.
If you make like cupcakes or cake, I like it so you can tell that the middle is really moist. That's everything for me.
Can I tell you one thing you'll be interested in hearing?
What?
That's the last muffin you're ever getting from me. By the way, I just want to be clear. By the way, one of the things I haven't done before, she is actually a baker. It's hard to believe, but she is a baker.
I'm a fake baker.
I'm not a real baker. I've never used olive oil in that kind of quantity as I did here, as per your instructions, as opposed to butter and stuff. What's the basic deal?
Well, chiffon cake, for example, uses oil. like carrot cake uses oil, right? The difference is butter. If you use butter, it's going to get staler faster, and it's not going to be as moist. Vegetable oil or olive oil, whatever you use, is a liquid at room temperature, and it's going to be very moist and hold its moistness longer. So in general, oil is actually better for texture than butter is. Butter has flavor, but oil is going to be the better ingredient for long-term moist cake.
Moistness
You do me a
very
favor.
important.
Take this muffin. When you go home, text me tonight and tell me if Marjorie's right and I cooked
It's
it too long.
overcooked.
I think it's
It's overcooked.
perfect. It is
No,
not
it's
overcooked.
okay.
So I have a quiz for you. You are maybe one of the most prolific producers of whatever you do, of anybody we have on the show. The books, the radio, the TV. We're going to talk about these food tours, which is so seductive to me. I can't believe it. We have a quiz for you, Christopher. You like quizzes or you don't?
I'll find out.
Well, good. Here is, you've written, there are a lot of cookbooks. By our count, there's 7 in the last 5 years. How many of the 7 cookbooks you're responsible for can you name right now? Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is tough. This is like Dan Rather interviewing like Nixon or something.
Exactly the same. That's what I would say. Yes.
Give your presidency a rating.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is Milk Street Bakes.
Yeah, that's one.
365.
Yeah.
Vegetables. We have Cookish, another one. We have Fast and Slow, right, which is another one.
Yeah.
We have...
You're panicking? You are a little bit, right?
I'm not panicking.
Okay, go ahead.
What is the other one?
Simple.
Tuesday night.
Noodles.
Simple.
Simple
noodles.
is great. Limited number.
Yep.
Tuesday night was
Yeah.
actually our best
Just
book
panicking,
of all
I can
time.
tell.
That's an 8 or 9.
How about instant pot cooking at the speed you need? You forgot
Fast
about
and
that?
slow.
Oh,
I said
fast and slow. Okay.
Okay.
That's it. Was fairly decent
Do I
performance.
get a B+?
I'd say C minus. Actually, we're talking to Christopher Kimball.
Hey, I
latest
haven't
cookbook
rated your muffin yet.
is actually
Yeah.
Milk Street Bakes, and it's terrific. And not to
But
mention,
we did talk about walks with Christopher Kimball, and I got a
And you
walk
got a
from
walk.
you, and it is life changing. It is
Good.
so much fun, and it's
you know
just,
who didn't get a walk?
well, Jim, it's the way it goes.
Incredible.
You just
There-
have to ask.
You just have
Okay,
to
I
ask.
got it.
It's a really good walk too, not one of the crummy ones I had before. But the other thing I thought was really different. You use a lot of different spices because you have all these different. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Cardamom. Cardamom. I mean, I wouldn't think of that, but it's in a lot of
Well,
it.
you had mentioned earlier the Swedish cardamom buns, which
Yeah.
they serve around the holidays. Those are outstanding.
I mean, but that's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't think we're not so creative. I don't think
Well,
with baking in the United States with these different spices.
Well, I've said this before, but if you look at Mastering the Art of French Cooking, how many spices were in there? None. I mean,
None.
some cinnamon maybe. I mean, French cooking doesn't tend to use spices. 'Cause
Wow.
They like the natural flavors of the food to come through, but most other places in the world use spices all the time. And we use cinnamon, nutmeg, et cetera, sort of, pumpkin spices or apple pie spices. But there's, another 30 spices out there, which, everybody uses. And if you start with big flavors like spices, right, or chilies or fermented sauces like soy sauce, the cooking process can be shorter and simpler because you've started with a big flavor. In French cooking, you don't start with big flavors. You start with good ingredients,
Yeah.
but you need time, you need heat, and you need technique to develop the flavors. You have to be Jacques Pepin, right? So if you start out with lemongrass, right, or chilies, well, you already have the big flavor, so that interim step is not as difficult.
By the way, Jacques Pepin, who I think just turned 90, who's been on our show a lot,
wonderful.
was at the GBH building for an event the other day. It was as if Barack Obama and every other living president had come to GBH. The response, the respect, the love for this guy is just... Did you tell us a great Julia Child story last time you were here? Am I confused?
I have a few.
Oh, can you give us one?
Yeah, well, when I first moved to Boston in '91, I got a call after a few months, and it was hello. It was Julia. So I'm
that's
going,
very good.
Well, I'm going like someone's putting me on. I said, "This isn't Julia. This is Julia." So we're gonna come over for dinner. So the next night I go over at 6 o'clock. She's standing in that doorway, which led eventually into her kitchen, filling the doorway, just the two of us, and. I found out about Julia in later years. She likes to put people on the spot.
Oh.
So she said, why don't you shuck some oysters? So she had this big service tray of oysters. And at that time, I'm still not great at it, but I was really awful. So like 10 minutes go by and she sneaks up, behind me and goes like, how's it going? I had like 2 oysters open. I had a bloody finger. It was just like the most embarrassing thing ever. And I said, Julia, here's the deal. I said, you're going to open the oysters. I'm going to get the wine. and everything will be fine. And so we got along great after that.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
So I mentioned the tours before. Tell people what you're doing. You're going to a ton of places. Tell people what the experience is like. What happens in these things?
To do the magazine and the books, we travel around the world, and we know people locally. So we thought, like a year ago, well, we've been there. Why don't we put together a tour based on our experiences? So we deal with people we know. We go out ourselves the first time around. We put together a tour trying to get away from the usual culinary tour, the usual, suspects, the usual restaurants, the usual farmers markets, that sort of thing. Get into people's homes, actually cook real home food, and put that tour together with our people we know there. And then we, have, I think, 12 people tops go on the tour. We went to Oaxaca. Actually, the islands in Venice is a really interesting tour. Istanbul, we have one in London and outside of London. And so we're trying to find the food experience that's very different than the usual things. Because if you go to Oaxaca, well, there's like a lot of culinary tours there with 6 places they all go to, right? So we wanted to find so the experience we've had, which is sort of going off the beaten path.
And it's not just to eat, sometimes to make and eat, right? Yes?
Oh, yeah, you cook.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
that's fabulous.
Absolutely.
And Portugal's a new one. That's going to be next year. Yeah, I mean, you don't hear that much about. Well, you do hear Portuguese food in Somerville and Cambridge, I guess, in my hometown of Fall River.
Oh, it's huge in Cambridge, and it's great in Cambridge.
Food. But there's a St. Michael's on the Azores where they speak Portuguese, where people go there. I know that they cook food in a volcano there, which I thought was really cool. That's one of the big tourist things to do, even though there's not that many tourists there. But what about Portugal?
I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds...
Well, can I tell a Portuguese story?
Cooking
Since you
food
just told
in the
a story,
volcano. Yeah.
Several years ago when I was hosting Greater Boston, I was nominated for Best Anchor in New England.
Oh.
Oh, well, you haven't gotten to it yet? I not only lost, but I lost to a woman who hosted a Portuguese cooking show from Fall River.
There you go.
That was rather deflating for a person with a rather large ego. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
in any case, thank you very much. Here's some text for you. Can you ask him, I assume that's you, what Dutch oven he prefers, Le Creuset or Staub? Is that how you pronounce
Staub.
it? Staub. Which do you prefer?
We make our own.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the answer to that question. Here's
Marissa. Did you see Marissa from
Yeah,
Cohasset?
I would read it. Yeah, go ahead.
She says the Milk Street Walk is life-changing. I love making French fries and popcorn with it. It's true. It is
Popcorn?
really...
Shrimp walk, really?
Yeah, as long as you had a top for it, yeah.
Yeah, I've never done the popcorn. I've done vegetables, and I love vegetables, and it's really great.
You can make bananas Foster in a wok.
How come you didn't read Joanna's text from YouTube?
Joanna says, cheap shot Marjorie toward Jim, leave his muffin alone.
Thank you, Joanna. We really...
That's a T-shirt right there.
Having just written this baking book, though, what do you think about the whole gluten-free movement? I mean, people have real problems with gluten, and it's...
I just had a feeling today was going to be the last day of my career. So, after about what I'm about to say.
Go ahead.
Well, if you really are gluten intolerant, like you have celiac disease, obviously that's important. I think a lot of people think gluten's a problem, and it's, I remember I was in Vermont a couple years ago in a little pizza place, and 2 women from New York walked in and said, "Is your pizza gluten-free?"
Yeah.
In Vermont? I don't think so. Gluten, also in Europe with the breads there, if you go eat bread in Europe, a lot of people say, I felt fine. Sometimes it's how the wheat's grown here, what's in the wheat. So it's not necessarily just the gluten. So I think it's been overdone. I think if you have a problem, yeah. But the problem with gluten-free is every recipe has to be specifically engineered. You can't just have gluten-free, rice flour or whatever. Sometimes that works, but if you're doing a loaf of bread versus a cookie, you really have to customize the mix.
It's
so
hard.
It's hard.
So you bake bread all the time, just because it's fun, or the smell,
How
or
about
what's
the
that
smell?
about?
Right. We only have a minute.
It's really not hard to do, and I tend to bake on Sunday, but I make a very dark rye bread, which I really like a lot, and that goes throughout the week. But it's so much better than what you get. I mean, even in Boston, you can get some great bread, but you can't get all the different kinds. Milk bread, for example, Japanese milk bread's great, so yeah.
Do you overcook the dark rye like I overcook the muffins, or do you decide to cook them the appropriate amount?
I always do what you do. So that's why I come here, to remind myself.
I assume I'm not alone. We only have 30 seconds left. I love, in the era of online everything, I love having a physical book
me too.
to cook from. I'm obviously not alone. You wouldn't be doing this.
Cookbooks still sell really well. Books have been selling well. I think some magazines still sell well. I think the physical product over time will become more of a luxury good and something people want. I think
and the photographs, I
Beautiful.
mean, your
They are
photography
Beautiful.
is
Who's
just...
the photographer, by the way? Do you know off the top of your head?
Well, Joe is in our office and does all the photography, but some of this is older. But we do it all in house.
The book is beautiful. Congratulations yet again. Great Christmas, Hanukkah, President Milk Street Bakes, Christopher Kimball. Great to see you, Chris. Be
Thank
well.
you so much for
Let me
being
know
with
what you
us.
think about the muffin. I know.
I'll text both of you.
Okay,
Kind.
thank you very much.
Good. Be well.
We want to say again, Christopher Kimball of Milk Street Kitchen, radio, TV, you name it. Thank you very much for being with us, Chris Kimball. The book, again, Milk Street
Great.
Bakes, a baking book with 200 sweet and savory recipes. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Oh, Milk Street Radio, Sundays at 3 o'clock here on 89 GBH. It's a really fun show to watch. Up next.
By the way, that has a 7 on it, too, on 89.7.
I forgot the 7?
Forgot the 7, but
Sorry,
it's okay.
89.7
Exactly.
GBH. Okay, we're going to read your
As far as I
text
know, anyway.
up next about rating the state legislature. That's next.
Part of the GBH News Equity and Justice Unit.
I feel that we have to do work to create trust with communities.
Community producer Magdiela Mata.
There's already been people that I've spoken to that are like, people only cover us when there's something bad. And so I'm trying to really focus and center the joy for people to feel that their community is represented in totality and not just this one negative angle.
Elevating issues of equity and justice. GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com. And MSI United States, bringing reproductive health care and all the opportunity that comes with bodily autonomy to women in some of the most remote places in the world. More at msiunitedstates.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Congresswoman Pressley will be with us at the bottom of the next hour at about 1:30. We're back on Friday at the library. We've been soliciting your texts all day about how you feel about the Massachusetts legislature. In the Globe this morning, Matt Stout, she used to work with Marjorie, he used to work with Marjorie at the Herald.
Boston Herald.
In the Globe, he wrote and he quoted the legislative leaders saying they've done, quote, historic work this session. But as you know, a few months ago, they were rated the least effective legislature in the United States of America. So we want to know if two truths can hold at once and how you rated the legislature's performance this year. And by the way, we should say they did a couple of good things.
They did.
Economic development, even though they did it almost in secret with no transparency and slipped some horrible things in. Like that, and maternal health. But overall, how do people feel?
Well, they did a lot of things after they were shamed into it from coming back but from their vacation to get these kinds of things. And they might have done more, except that they had to go to a trip to Cuba to study healthcare in Cuba.
Yeah, but as a result, they couldn't pass the healthcare bills that they were doing here.
Here's Art from West Bridgewater.
What does he say?
As usual, the Massachusetts legislature should be jailed for grand theft, for cashing their paychecks. I guess he's not impressed.
So that's not a plus. No.
Anonymous texter says Massachusetts legislators doing any work at all is historic. Another one, the word to describe the Massachusetts legislature performance is flaccid. And listen to this one. The only way I consider the legislature successful or historic is if they actually passed anything to make life better for anybody in the middle class in Massachusetts. Cost of living, housing, transit, roads, everything rated the worst. Have they done that recently? Crickets.
Well, they may, no, in fairness, they did pass the housing bond bill and economic development. The problem is it is done in a totally non-transparent kind of way. Lots of things like in the housing bill that people in Boston wanted, like rent control, were not included. Why? Because we also learned in the Globe there are tons of developers who would be negatively affected. Tom from Billerica texted and said, I'm thankful that my bathroom plunger is more effective than this legislature. If you read Matt Stout's piece, here are just a few of the things they apparently will not have time to complete. A bill on opioids, which would license these recovery coaches and make them the cost reimbursable by insurance. Steward healthcare, penalties if you don't disclose data that allowed them to disintegrate without leaders knowing. these drug-related, these pharmacy benefit managers who we've talked about. James Swift is a big advocate. They're the middle people that drive up costs. They're not doing that. Mayor Wu's bill around property taxes to provide some relief. And
how about the wheelchair
Tell
repairs?
Tell the wheelchair. It's unbelievable.
People's wheelchairs break down. These are people that are on mass health. That means they have economic difficulties. They're not wealthy people. And it can take not weeks, but sometimes months for people to get their wheelchairs repaired.
Which means they can't leave their house.
They're stuck in their house.
What is an excuse for not doing that today?
A fire hazard. I mean, suppose there's some terrible thing that happens and you are unable to get out of your building. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But the fact that they can call it historic, it's Spilka that called it historic, right?
She did? I don't know. One of them.
Yeah, one of them called it historic. It just kind of shows why the biggest winner in the 5 ballots when we had the election in November, people want to audit the legislature. They may never be able to audit the legislature, but people are disgusted with the legislature. Absolutely. Brian and Peabody suggest that maybe the legislature should look into getting tickets for the Boston Public Radio show at the Boston Public Library. Maybe the legislators can come by and see Jim and Marjorie during their 5-month vacation.
You know, one of the big scams that Stewart did is sell their land and lease their land back, which ended up leading one of the major causes of their horrible financial state and screwing tens of thousands, in fact, killing some patients. There was a bill to ban that in the future. That's not going to pass either. Now, on an up note, because we always like to end on an up note, Jeremiah from Arlington has a very moving text. He says, I love the Massachusetts legislature because they make me feel better about my complete lack of productivity and efficiency.
Yeah. And we should point out that it's really hard to run against an incumbent in the legislature. It is very hard to change what goes on up there, and it really does impact your life in a very big way. You mentioned rent control, you mentioned housing, all these things that they could have had some urgency about, and they don't. It's difficult to be urgent when you're going to Cuba to investigate healthcare down there and you have a 5-month vacation. Anyway, thank you for all your calls and texts. You thought they were done with politics for the day, but actually, we're not done with politics for the day. Representative Ayanna Pressley is going to be with us at 1:30, but that's not who's next. I'm on the wrong page.
Death clock.
Oh, the death clock. That's right. Yeah, okay. You fill out a few things online, you figure out when you're going to die.
The day you're going to die.
What a scam.
The day you're going to die.
Oh, I missed that part.
The day you're going to die.
They tell me the day?
They tell you the exact day and the exact year.
Okay.
We'll discuss it with you.
Yes, we will. That's up next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We have broadcast
committed to lifelong learning, and the Beacon Circle shares that commitment with gifts of $2,400 or more. It's one big way to help keep our community informed and connected. Learn more at gbh.org/Beacon Circle.
Support for GBH comes from you and Burton's Grill and Bar, serving weekend brunch with dishes like chicken and waffles, cast iron French toast.
With NPR, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. We'll open phone and text lines. The new AI-powered tool claims to be able to determine to the second when each of us is going to die. And it goes down 5 minutes every time you eat a hot dog, by the way. Marjorie and I both did the calculation. At 877-301-8970, you can call or text. Would an added awareness of the time we have on Earth inspire you to live life to its fullest, or would you prefer not to know when your time is about to come?
I'm Marjorie Egan, and I'm happy that both of us have at least until 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern today. That means we have time to talk with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley to get her thoughts on President Biden's pardoning his son Hunter and what the president should do, pardon-wise, to address mass incarceration in his final weeks in office. All that and more next. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President-elect Trump's nominee for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is still facing major headwind. Now, NPR's Tamara Keith reports Hegseth's mother sat for an interview with Fox and Friends as part of an effort to save his nomination.
Penny Hegseth said she did the interview to set the record straight about an email she sent her son in 2018. That email, published by the New York Times, said, among other things, quote, I have no respect for any man that belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, and uses women for his own power and ego. You are that man. Hegseth said on Fox that she hastily sent that email while her son was in the middle of a difficult divorce.
He's a changed man, and I just hope people will get to know who Pete is today, especially our dear female senators.
Looking directly at the camera, she said President-elect Trump knows the Pete of today. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Top officials with the New York City Police Department are calling today's fatal shooting of United Healthcare CEO a targeted and brazen attack. Brian Thompson was killed when a suspect wearing dark clothing and a mask came up behind the 50-year-old executive and fired several rounds. Thompson had just arrived at the Midtown Manhattan hotel where the United Health Group was scheduled to hold its annual investors conference less than 2 hours later. The suspect is still at large. The Arctic Ocean is hurtling toward an alarming milestone, according to a new study. Within just a few years, the usually frozen area could soon experience its first day without sea ice. Here's NPR's Alejandra Barunda.
The Arctic Ocean is usually covered by a vast expanse of white sea ice. But now, thanks to climate change during the summer, a lot of that ice melts away. The loss of the ice speeds along the process of global warming and can even affect weather patterns worldwide. So far, though, at least a small patch of ice has survived through each hot season. But the new study, published in the journal Nature Communications, finds that could change soon. The first full summer day without any sea ice covering the Arctic could be as little as 3 years away. But climate action, like cutting fossil fuel burning soon, could delay that milestone by years or even decades. Alejandra Barunda, NPR News.
President-elect Trump's nominating billionaire and commercial astronaut Jared Isaacman to head NASA. In his post on Truth Social, Trump cited Isaacman's record heading a global financial tech company and supporting the Defense Department. Isaacman also worked with SpaceX CEO Elon Musk earlier this year. Several weeks ago, Trump tapped Musk and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy to lead a new outside advisory commission on efficiency. Critics have raised conflict of interest concerns about Musk in particular, whose companies have lucrative government contracts. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. A new study from BU shows a link between the number of years that men play hockey and their risk for developing CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. GBH's Esteban Bustillos has the details.
The research found that among the hockey players studied, their odds of having CTE went up by 34% for each year they competed. Jesse Mez is the co-director of research at BU's CTE Center.
We see a similar increase in risk for football with each additional year of play. I think that we expected to have a smaller increase than what we see in football, and the fact that that relative increase is similar was surprising.
While the study doesn't say anything about the total prevalence of CTE among hockey players, Mez hopes it will spur changes that could make the game safer. Esteban Bustillos, GBH News 89.7.
The New England Patriots are getting their own training facility and locker room outside of Gillette Stadium. Team officials announced today that construction will soon begin on a brand new standalone training facility for the exclusive use of the team. And while it's outside the stadium, it's still only a field goal away. The new 3-story building will be located on the southeast side of the stadium, right next to the lower practice field. It'll be used for the team's day-to-day activities, have a new player lounge, open space locker room, and an expanded weight room. Team officials say they're hoping for a spring 2026 opening. 37 degrees, this is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
It's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. You want to mention that Representative Ayanna Pressley is going to join us at 1:30, around there, and we're going to be back, Jim and I, that is, here on Friday at the Boston Public Library. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
So on this show, we and a lot of our listeners have spent plenty of airtime wringing our hands about AI taking over every aspect of our lives, and so for the next 20 minutes, you got to forget about that, because a lot of you have come to the conclusion there is one thing you do support AI taking over: predicting the exact moment you will shed your mortal coil and expire. That's right. AI's latest tool is something called the death clock. An app, it's not just an app, you can do it online, but you can download the app. You input some personal health information like your lifestyle habits, your BMI, and like magic, the computer grants you with heavenly-like omniscience, complete with a little image of a tarot card. And I did it last night. I was surprised to learn I have a little bit more time on Earth than before I expire, which is great news because a lot more time to eat boar's head liverwurst and sausage of the month from Marjorie. But the question for you is severalfold. Do you want to know, or is ignorance bliss? And by the way, this is based on zillions and zillions of models that they have incorporated. They say it's accurate. They do give you a precise day. So is ignorance bliss, or would you like to know what they believe, this AI believes, is the exact moment you will cease to exist in the physical realm? And by the way, if you've done it already, we really want to hear from you. Marjorie and I have both done it. Marjorie is the only person in the world who got her result and complained that it was too long, that she'd be living. This is true.
Yeah.
Is that right? Living too long.
First of all, I think there's a lot of hooey. And second of all, I really don't want to live to be 105. I mean,
yours was 105?
105. That's pretty old. Yeah.
You know what mine was?
What?
I have to talk really fast during today's show. Let's leave it at that. By the way,
this is a John from Westford, Jim.
What did he say?
He said he took the death clock survey, and it said, I will drive off the road in frustration while listening to Jim on the radio and die in a fiery car crash next Tuesday, to be exact. But he says he loves you anyway, Jim.
I like John from Westford, yeah. Our politics aren't the same, but he's a good caller, a good listener. So the issue is, again, have you done it? Would you do it? Or do you simply not want to know? And by the way, if you want to know what you put in your birth date, you put in whether you smoked, which apparently is a huge factor.
Yeah, it's very inexact.
You decide, it's not inexact.
It doesn't say how much did you smoke and how long did you smoke
your
for.
BMI is pretty precise. You tell your height and your
they don't have the right height, the right weight.
And whatever. Well, it's close. I mean, don't get so upset about it. I was able to say I'm 6'4", not 6'5".
Okay.
You think that's close enough?
I don't think so.
Now, here's the other thing.
Yep.
When I was filling this out last night, the issue that I was confronting was, do I lie to the app? And then I said to myself, as I'm about to lie about a variety of things, probably, saying I weighed 170 pounds or some such thing.
I thought you did.
No, that's what I've said in the past. I think people do lie to these programs. I used to do, these insurance calculators existed before this, not quite this precise. So you could find out roughly how long you're going to live. These insurance companies do this, obviously. Those are the calculations they make, or else they wouldn't be able to sell insurance and make money. But there's this, a friend of mine did this 2 days ago, and what she said to me was, which I thought was great, and she meant it seriously, I 90% told the truth in the app. Why would you lie to the app? Why do it at all if you're going to lie so the results aren't real?
David from Quincy had a tragic answer.
What happened?
David says, I did the death clock, and it said, I've already expired.
877. Has anybody in the audience done the death clock yet? Nobody? Nobody? Oh, you're doing it right now.
Yeah.
This guy, when you're done, can you yell out how long you're going to live, or unless it's bad, in which case you can keep it to yourself?
Yeah.
Has anybody else done the death clock? You're kidding me. I am like, nobody, not one person in the audience.
I didn't know about it till you told me.
Well, you did it today. 877-301-8970.
I mean, would you want to know? Actually, I would not.
Well, why did I fill it out if I don't want to know?
Because it's not accurate.
It's not, how do you know it's not accurate?
Jim, it doesn't tell you how much you weigh, how much.
Yes, it does. Your BMI is a function of your weight and height.
How many people even know their BMI? Do you know your BMI?
No, but if you look carefully, it says if you don't know your BMI, if you fill in your weight and your height and something else, you know what it does? It tells you your approximate BMI.
I would say that the question of do you smoke is, how long did you smoke? How much did you smoke when
That's
you were
not that
smoking?
precise. That's true.
Yeah, that's very...
How did you say your attitude towards life? You could say optimistic, neutral, or suicidal, I think were the options. Or something like that.
Jamie just pointed out, if I make it to 105, I can be on the air during the Barron Trump administration. So I don't know if I'm that optimistic. I did say optimistic, though. That's supposed to matter if you're optimistic or not.
I said optimistic. Do you think I'm optimistic?
No.
Okay, well, that's a problem. That would have shortened. Let me tell you one other thing you can do. I'm obviously obsessed with this death clock thing. This guy, how are you doing over there? You filling it out? Hurry up, will you please? Thank you. Here's an interesting thing. You know what you can do, which I'm sure you didn't realize? If it says to you you're going to live, let's say, for argument's sake, till you're 85 years old, what you can do is go back, adjust some of the things, and find out, for example, if you weigh 240, if you only weighed 220, would you live longer? And you can find out what changes in your behavior, how they would affect your longevity, which I did.
Now we have some advice from the texters.
What are they saying?
Jim, just to be on the safe side, when you leave your house at your age, always leave the house with clean underwear and a clean dickie.
That is really, it's really
And Paul from
unfortunate.
Fort Lauderdale says he's 57 years old and let's say high mileage. I put my information in. I got about 20 minutes left.
Can I tell you something? Before we get to the calls, which we're going to do in a second at 877-301-8970, the reason it said 104 years old for you, there is nothing, I know you hate this because it's complimentary. You're incredibly fit. You haven't smoked in decades, other than when you're drinking. You have an occasional cigarette,
Not
right?
anymore.
Oh, you don't anymore?
No, not anymore.
So every criteria, you are an
long
optimistic person.
I'm an optimistic person.
Every factor that was part of the calculation about how long you're going to live would be supportive of you living a long life.
Starting with smoke when you're young is bad. I started to smoke when I was young. That's
Really?
bad. Yeah, it's very bad.
Okay,
Anyway, 877-301-8970.
Death clock.
Death clock. Would you want to know the date on which you were going to die? And if so, what would you do about it? Susan from Cambridge, thank you for calling.
Hello, Susan.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hi.
This is an homage to all the actuaries out there in the
Oh, it's
world. I
beautiful.
live with a death clock. I live with an actuary. And 20 years ago, he told me the day I would die, and he's offered to do it for all of our friends.
No, is that really
you don't
true?
need a machine or AI.
Wait, is that really
This
true?
Really true. This is really true.
Did you ask him to do that, or he just volunteered it?
No, he made it up himself. He made the whole program up, and then he said, "This is when you're going to die." It was in my birthday card.
That's swell.
How'd you feel about that?
I was very happy. I got high marks.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if that's exactly a gift I'd like from my spouse, but I hear you, Susan. Thank you.
Yeah.
How long are you going to live, by the way? Just curious. A long time?
97, which is about 3 years short of my family's typical timeline.
Oh, well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, see, I think genetics has a lot to do with
that
this
isn't
kind
part of the
stuff.
calculation.
No, it is not part of the calculation.
Susan, thank you for the call. How long were your parents old when they died?
Not my father.
Oh, he wasn't?
No, and he looked great.
How old was he?
Keeled right over.
How old?
65.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I remember thinking the day he died, he looks terrific, and then boom.
Gone.
He was gone.
Okay.
It was terrible.
Sorry I asked.
Terrible.
877-301-8970.
Okay, Dave from Taunton says, I'm more interested in the death dates of others. You know who.
That's really not nice. But by the way, you could probably fill out things on other public people. All you need to know is their weight and height, essentially. You know, if they smoke. For example, Donald Trump does not smoke, correct?
He does not smoke, and he does not drink.
Oh, by the way, drinking is one of the things, too.
Yeah.
How often do you drink? That's precise. Do you drink 2 to 4 times a week, every night, 2 to 4 times a month, never, that sort of thing. So that's precise.
Yeah, the news on drinking lately has been very bad, hasn't it?
That even moderation is not a good thing. Nothing is allegedly good. Joanne, you're in Dorchester. You're next on Boston Public Radio. How are you, Joanne?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I think we're good.
My question is, I don't care about knowing my own time of death, but I want to know what insurance companies and stuff are looking at this data, and they might, deny me life insurance or something like that because they know more about me than they should. In other words, privacy issues. And even if you don't have to put in your name, you put in your birth date and they know, what computer you're doing this from. They can probably figure out who you are.
But Joanne, if you have life insurance, they don't need the death clock. They ask you questions that actually are far more intrusive than this. And so they do have the information you don't want them to have,
Well, that could be. I mean, I've never had life insurance because so I wouldn't know what they ask you. But I still worry about other people, other companies and stuff knowing about this kind of thing.
That's not a bad thing.
Else.
Yeah, you're making a very good point. Actually, even though there are no identifiers as such, it does narrow the field because of your birth date. Unless what you could do. Joanne, thanks for the call. I actually just came up with a brilliant idea. That's probably not so brilliant. Joanne raised a legitimate point about the ability to sort of de-aggregate, if that's a word, or disaggregate a thing. Put your birth date in one day off. It's obviously going to have virtually no impact on the ultimate projection of your death, and at the same time, they won't be able to identify you. What do you think of that?
Oh, that's very clever.
How long are you going to live? How long? He said this guy in the audience says the good news is he's going to live till 90. The bad news is he's going to die the day before Thanksgiving. That's really sad. I mean, to have missed that is really.
Yeah, you should be able to
just have it
turkey
early, the prior weekend, so everything will be fine. 877-301-8970.
You know, one of the texters wants to know how often you do eat liverwurst from Boar's Head. What about Hebrew National Salami Sandwich? Those things are not very good for you.
Yeah.
What did you say about your diet was? It gives you poor, good, and excellent in the deaf thing.
Excellent? What was my diet?
You're supposed to rate your diet.
I was actually, talking about coincidence, I was eating a liverwurst sandwich at the time, and I said excellent. So, I did not say
Say
excellent.
good?
I said, I think I do. I eat you know how much, I eat relatively healthily.
No, you do.
My problem is not the quality of the food I eat. The problem is I don't stop eating. It's a volume problem, a portion control issue. We're talking about the death clock. You can Google death clock, as the gentleman in the audience that is allegedly going to live to be 90, and find out your own deal. What are you laughing about?
Sam from New Haven says, I am not an optimist at all. He said, you view yourself as an optimistic? Do you hear yourself on all topics related to Trump? Comes across as doom and gloom to me. And Sam, you are right. I am rather gloomy about the future president, but maybe he'll surprise me.
Well, but in all seriousness, I thought about this, but we have to take a break. Before we do, I thought about this a long time before I filled it in. Don't you think I have an optimistic approach to the whole living thing? Even if we don't need a break. Thank you, John. Even if I'm not particularly why are you looking at me like that? What should I have entered on this thing?
Well, I don't think
neutral?
I don't think you have to say suicidal.
Neutral?
I think probably neutral or perhaps pessimistic.
Yeah.
Or cynical.
So pessimistic means I'd live till Thursday. It's essentially of next week. By the way, that's a big factor in this calculation. Again, the way you know how much everything matters is after you do the real one, you go back and adjust it by changing individual factors, and you learn a lot more about how you could adjust certain things in your life.
877-301-8970 is the number. There's something called the death clock, which you can go online. You look for death clock, you go online, you fill it out.
You did
it tells you how long you will live and on what day you will die. I'm very suspicious, but here's a texture that says that they just did the death clock and they found out their death would be September 1st, 2043, by which time, it's 53. They'll be 90. Hope Bruce is still touring, or I don't care if I live that long.
By the way, here's an interesting one for you before we get back to the calls. Anonymous texter, what is the impact of eating Thanksgiving carrots on the death clock?
Yeah.
That would lengthen your life.
I eat a lot of carrots. You know what they said when you're a kid? Give you curly hair and blue eyes.
I never heard that. I thought you just get better eyesight.
That was a big thing about
Al
carrots.
on the road, you were next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about the death clock, of course. Welcome.
How you doing, guys?
I think we're good,
I'm
Al.
ecstatic. I'm ecstatic.
Why is that?
I just did the death clock. I'd never heard of it before, but I'm going to live to be 115.
How much of the truth did you share with the death clock, Al?
What'd you say?
Mostly.
Exactly.
They had some woman.
So
go ahead.
I did an Ironman a few years ago, and I think that really bumped up my score.
You didn't do an Ironman. You did?
Lake Placid, 1238.
Did you say Lake Flaccid or Lake Placid?
That's very impressive.
After Placid.
So Al,
Lake Placid, 2023.
So Ironman is when you swim and run and bicycle?
Bike. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, 26 mile run.
Wow. How old were you when you did this?
53.
Wow, that's pretty impressive, Al.
That is impressive.
And do you still keep it up? I mean, do you still work out a lot?
I try.
Yeah, but that's...
To be honest with you, I do it a lot more these days because it's like meditation for me.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Well, that's supposed to all help. Working out is supposed to be very good for you.
Al, thanks for the info
They ask
there.
you how fit you are.
They do?
You just did the death clock.
I forgot about it already. What did it say? Oh, it says how much exercise.
Yeah, how much exercise are you an Ironman was one of the ultimate questions. So there, Al was able to put Ironman in
I did
there.
say in that, tell me if it's right, I said I generally run 20 to 30 marathons a year. Was that a mistake to put? No, I told the truth. I did moderate exercise, which I do. Roger, you're in Rhode Island. We're talking about the death clock. Hey there.
Hi. I haven't done the death clock, but I know the day I'm going to die, which is August 15th.
Why?
Because it's predestined. In 2006, I was doing home hospice for my mother. I'd been up with her till 3 in the morning. She hadn't been cognizant for a while. And 7 o'clock, the nurse came in and said she had passed. In 1951, we lived in Alaska. My father's bush plane left.
We're losing.
15th, 1951, and so I kind of feel like I got a date in mind. I just don't have the year.
So you okay with that?
Oh, I'm fine with it.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, that's actually probably a little more comfortable, knowing the date and being able to sort of project how many years you have left. Roger, we hope you last many more August 15th. Thank you very much for the call. Appreciate it.
Josh from Rhode Island, just filling mine out. It seemed like texting you my results would be the best use of what little time I've got left.
It's not funny. I don't know.
The death clock says anyone who eats at Whole Foods salad bars will die of salmonella by 2026.
This is a good one, too. Read the next one, Mary.
Mary from Raynham says once Trump gets in, everyone should deduct at least 4 years.
By the way, didn't one of our coworkers, I don't want to say, didn't one of our coworkers fill in the thing, and because she smoked a lot when she was younger, she didn't make it into the 80 or 90? I mean,
she still
did?
smokes.
Oh, she did.
She still smokes.
Oh, she does?
Yeah,
How much she smoke?
I don't know. That was the thing. They don't ask you how much you smoke.
Okay, I heard you say that.
Yeah, that's a big thing. How much you smoke does matter.
Okay, fine.
877-301-8970 is the number. We're talking about the death clock. Do you want to know the day you will die? I think most of us do not want to know. You haven't
So why'd
answered
you
yet.
do it?
Because I don't believe it. I mean, I think it's bogus. Do you want to know the day you die?
Yeah, I know the day I'm dying. I did the thing. I did the death clock. I know the day I'm dying.
All right.
You know what I'm doing, by the way?
What are
I
you
just
doing,
want to be
Jim?
clear, which I said to Jamie. He said it was fine. I'm taking the day off before. So I'm not doing the show. I'll tell you,
okay.
I'm not doing the show. So I get my things in order. Yeah, really. Okay. And have some fun, you know?
Yeah, Rachel from Nashville. What
Hello,
do you think, Rachel?
What's your deal?
Hello.
Hello.
I was wondering, with the death clock, we may know the day, but how do we know what our health is going to be? Will we have Alzheimer's? Will we be healthy?
Well, on the day you die, you're not that healthy. If that's your question, that means you're done. You're kaput on the day they give you. The date they give you, you're done. But no, it does not tell you. There's not enough information entered. Marjorie's right about this to project how healthy you'll be leading up to the specific death date that is published on the death clock. So no, unfortunately, it doesn't get that precise. But stay healthy, eat well, and get a lot of sleep.
Wait.
Huh?
So, Jim, I just want to say, whatever it is, you have to remember to hygge thyself.
Oh, hygge.
What?
Hygge.
Hygge. We did many shows on this. Thank you, Rachel. I'm so glad you brought that up. The way to along, and the fact that they do not have a box that says, do you do hygge? Hygge. Is it H-Y-G-G-E, Jamie? How do you spell this thing? Okay, thank you, Zoe. Hygge is a Swedish or a whatever the hell it is thing. That it's like a relaxation or commune.
The sauna bath?
No. It's like
the communal baths.
Or no, it's not that either. It's some sort of relaxing hygge kind of way of living. And what is it? Thank you. Wouldn't it be great? That's Julian, whatever his name is. Wouldn't it be great if they had a box for hygge practitioners on the death clock?
They don't have. It doesn't get that specific.
You know what it does? It slows down your metabolism, and even I know that slowing down your metabolism is a good thing.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Here's a texter. The AI clock told me I will die on the same day as all humanity dies when the AIs take over.
Here's the definition of hygge, thanks to Nicole. It's a quality of coziness like fuzzy socks sitting by a fireplace.
I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer in that.
Fuzzy socks?
Well, no, I like the warm and cozy slippers. You know what
a couple
I mean?
of years ago, I gave Marjorie very expensive red wool
socks.
LL Bean
They were horrible.
knee-length socks.
Yeah.
That first of all, that was horrible. Apparently, you're welcome. The muffin I made that she told me was great became too overdone when Christopher Kimball showed up and she wanted to impress him. I mean, really?
Yeah. Well,
that's not hygge to me, Marjorie. I'm sorry. It's just not.
It is true, though.
What is it?
With baking, it's always better to bake a little bit less than they tell you, and you feel it in the oven.
Yeah.
And that way you know.
Well, can I just say something? I don't think honesty was required. That's my opinion. In that circumstance, it was not like you're appearing before your maker. This was a guy who wrote a cookbook.
I wanted to ask him about overcooking baked goods, and you did overcook the baked goods, but it's okay. It was still good. I ate the whole thing. Diego on the road. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Diego on the road.
Hi. Listen, so I taught kindergarten for many, many decades, and couple of years near the end, a kid came up to me and said, "Mr. Diego, you're pretty old. When are you going to die?" And fortunately, I didn't have the death clock, so I just told him, "Fortunately, Adonis, we don't get that information." I'd to share that.
Well, that's actually a good story there, Diego. Thank you very much for the call, and we're glad you're still with us. 877-301-8970.
Okay, we have a book suggestion.
What is it?
Related to the topic of knowing when you will die, says a texter, Leanne Moriarty's latest book, Here One Moment. And
What's
I
that
guess
about?
Gone the Next.
Oh, I guess
It's
so.
a book about knowing when you're going
But, you know, there are
to
a lot
die.
of books about whether a guy we know wrote a book about Alzheimer's in his family. And when they finally came up, don't they have a test that shows you whether you have that gene or whatever it is?
Talking about Charlie Pierce.
Yeah, and a lot of
he
people...
wrote a great book about that.
Right. Afraid to Remember?
Not My Country.
Can you look that up, Charles
Charlie
Pierce,
Pierce's book.
about 20 years ago?
It was a terrific book because all his, I think he had 6 or 7 uncles, and 5 of the 7 had
Didn't he say he didn't
Alzheimer's.
want to know, right? Did he not say
I
he
don't
didn't want to
remember,
know?
but he's a really talented writer. He writes for Esquire. He used to anyway. I don't know if he still does.
Okay, Scott in Dartmouth, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Time's running out here, so say what you have to say. Hi, Scott.
Hi. Yeah, I just want to know if anybody has ever done the death clock twice and gotten the exact same date.
You know, that's a very
brilliant.
good question, Scott.
That is brilliant.
I would predict that every time you do it, you get a different date. That's what I would
You don't know
suspect.
that. Why are you disparaging the death clock?
Because I'm suspicious.
That's excellent, Scott. Why have you done that?
Have I done it?
Yeah.
No.
Are you like a scientist or something? What are you?
Because he's suspicious too.
Yeah.
Right?
I am.
Absolutely. I do
Scott,
too.
one last thing. You sound like a guy, you're in Dartmouth, who has probably practiced hygge quite a lot. Have you?
Oh, yeah.
You have?
No.
Thank you. Is that
Hygge.
Julian? Can we hear Julian again?
Hygge.
Hygge. Thank you. Hygge.
Okay,
Scott,
John
goodbye.
from the
Thank
car
you for the
says
call.
he doesn't know about this Iron Man stuff, but he says, I myself am more of a Tin Man, sitting watching The Wizard of Oz and eating pumpkin pie. So there you go.
You want to hear a really beautiful text from Liz? She's priced out of Cambridge, but obviously not forever, because she says, Jim, whenever you're going to die, please let it be no sooner than May, so I have a chance to see you all at the BPL once I move back to Massachusetts. That's a lovely note.
That is a lovely note.
Okay.
It's a
Has
very
anybody
lovely
else done the death clock other than this character over here since you did it? How did it do with you? No, that's not true.
109.
Is that really true?
See, that's the thing.
The woman with the guy who's going to be 90 is allegedly going to live to 109.
Here's why this is a scam. Nobody ever tells you you're going to die.
How do you know she's not
at
going to live to
42?
109?
Because almost nobody lives to
Look
109.
at her. Look at him. They both
She
look
looks great.
slim
Okay,
and
there
they're
you go. There you go.
quite attractive.
You could go on. You never know. It's very rare.
Yeah.
So I think basically you're not going to do it if everybody told you you're going to die at 40. You know what I mean? They're going to make sure that you're going to die a long time. It's like when you go to a fortune teller. They never tell you you're going to walk out and get hit by a car.
Actually, I have a friend who went to a fortune teller about a few years ago, and you know this woman, and when she asked about the future, the fortune teller says, I don't see anything. And you know what that means? There isn't a future. She was totally freaked out.
Is she still alive?
No, she actually became a hygge aficionado, and she's living along. Charlie, this is so out of control. This is Charlie Pierce's great book. It was like 20 years ago. Hard to Forget, an Alzheimer's story, and it was really beautifully written and quite moving. You should check it.
What is it called again?
Hard to Forget, an Alzheimer's story.
Oh, it was a really good
Yeah.
book. One of our texters wants to know before we leave here, how would hot dog eating champion Joey Chestnut rank on the death clock?
Well, do you remember, since we're doing this is a serious thing, the University of Michigan, which is not like some scam operation, did a survey that we talked about a couple of years ago, which showed how much you add to your life in time based on eating certain healthy foods. And they also talked about foods that shorten your life. And do you remember the number of minutes? There was something
a lot.
It was like 30 minutes off your life for every hot dog you've ever eaten. And my attitude was, so be it. That's exactly where I was. Do you have anything else you want to say? Or want to take a break?
Somebody else did it a second time. You know what happened?
Same.
Different
That's
date.
I'm sorry.
Texter says
those are cynics.
Different date.
Like you and that texter.
I'm very cynical about it. Absolutely right.
So you should become friends with that woman. She's going to live to like 130. You're going to live to 115.
We can hang out. We can eat hot dogs together.
You can do it, whatever it is. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, here it is. The study from the University of Michigan. This is their some science department. You lose 36 minutes off your life for every hot dog you consume.
Okay.
Do you like hot dogs? I forget.
No, I don't.
Oh my God!
But my sister makes the hot dog, those little tiny dogs and that syrupy sauce. That's her go-to
fabulous.
hors
I've had
d'oeuvre.
that. It's really delicious.
Yeah, she's going to go on forever,
Yeah.
even though she's eating all those hot dogs.
It's really good for you, by the way. The only thing better than the hot dog itself is the syrup in which she cooks it. It's very healthy kind of thing.
Thank you very much for your calls. We are moving on because we're going to talk up next with Representative Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She's going to zoom in. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, 1 month after voters approved a ballot question allowing rideshare drivers to unionize, drivers are doing just that. It's been a year since Boston gave civilian flaggers the green light to handle traffic at construction sites, but they're still not on the job. And everyone is at the mercy of the housing market, but homeowners are facing extra cost spikes. That's all coming up at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And North Shore Music Theater, A Christmas Carol, the 35th anniversary production of the holiday musical, is on stage at Bill Henney's North Shore Music Theater from December 5th through 22nd. More at nsmt.org. And Rogers Fish Company, founded by Roger Berkowitz. You can give the gift of New England seafood dishes, including double clam chowder, crab cakes, lobster, and fish delivered to your doorstep. Online ordering at rogersfishco.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She is Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back here on Friday at the library. Next Wednesday, Mayor Wu joins us for an hour for Ask the Mayor, and we hope you join us for that too. We're going to be joined in a minute or two by Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. We're a little bit ahead. I'll introduce her when she gets online, but I just want to say one of the first things we're going to talk to her about is long before, about several weeks before, Joe Biden pardoned his son. She led a group of roughly 60 members of the House of Representatives in urging the president, again, before he pardoned his son, to exercise his pardon powers very broadly, to look at people, particularly low-income people, people of color, who've been discriminated against in the most egregious of ways by the justice system. And I have to say, that was a good idea. She'll describe it to us. A good idea before Biden's pardon of his son, and an even better idea since he did what he did. Do you not agree?
I hope he does. I mean, I absolutely hope he does, because the justice system has been unfair to many thousands of Americans. We talk a lot about we used to anyway, it's an older book now, but The New Jim Crow, which is a wonderful book that talked about, Isabella Wilkinson is the writer. It talked a lot about the racial disparities in the criminal justice system and the poverty disparities in the racial justice system. And I think we've learned that, a million years ago, we learned it when O.J. Simpson was acquitted of killing his wife, and I think most people, including many members of the jury, thought he did it, but he had the ability to hire a very, very talented lawyer. We saw Donald Trump being able to delay the justice system because he spent $50 million on attorneys, and I think it was a year's period of time.
He didn't spend it.
People that donated to him.
Campaign funds.
Yeah,
right.
he didn't pay for it. So I think that's always been true. And I think if you are poor, you're screwed.
Well, we're going to talk to the Congresswoman about it right now because we're joined on Zoom by Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She represents the 7th Congressional District that includes Chelsea, Somerville, Everett, Randolph, parts of Boston, Milton, and most importantly, my corner of Cambridge. Congresswoman, it's great to talk to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Yeah, Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us. Jim just mentioned how weeks ago, before this whole pardon of Joe Biden for his son, Hunter, came up, you had requested something with some of your fellow House Democrats from the president. Tell us about your request to Joe Biden.
Yes, I mean, this certainly is not an issue that is new to me. I've been working in the space of criminal legal reform for a long time. Having introduced legislation, the Fixed Clemency Act, to address the backlog, and more recently, as you cite, a letter to the White House with, I think, 60 plus of my Democratic colleagues calling on President Biden to use his clemency authority to reunite people with their families and give people an opportunity to make a positive contribution to society. People who are unjustly incarcerated because of sentencing disparities, people on death row where there was proven racial bias in their cases, women who are incarcerated because they were defending themselves against their abusers, cannabis convictions. And, to the president's credit, he's already done some of this work when it comes to cannabis convictions and also with LGBTQ service members. I think this is a legacy thing. This is an opportunity for Joe Biden to cement his legacy in this space. And it's deeply personal. My story is my story. It's not an anomaly. It's not a unique one. But, my father is someone who was incarcerated for crimes he committed while battling a substance use disorder. And my father should have been met with compassionate, on-demand care and treatment. And instead, his disease was criminalized. And it caused great harm and destabilization to our family. There was great shame and stigma that I experienced. My father, because of second chance Pell Grants, which I also fight for, attained 2 advanced degrees while incarcerated, came out as an assistant dean of a college, a professor of journalism, and today is a successfully published author. So there are many people in limbo right now. I think the office of the pardon attorney has a backlog of more than 10,000 people. So that's 10,000 families in waiting. We're just coming off of Thanksgiving where people had loved ones because of this mass incarceration crisis that were not at the dinner table. And let's reunite people with their families by the Christmas holiday and give them an opportunity to make a positive contribution, people that are elderly, disabled, et cetera.
Congresswoman, maybe I should have known this, but I didn't. You just mentioned that your father was a published author. So tell listeners that might be interested where they can find what he wrote.
I'll certainly put some stuff up on my platform, but more recently, he has a poetry book out called Unseen Scars, and a couple of biographical pieces. You're only innocent once, and once is not enough, and Without a Compass.
Wow.
But again, the point is there are many people that are behind the wall, that are unjustly incarcerated, people who have been there just for far too long. I mean, I'll share someone like Michelle West. She's serving a 2 life plus 50-year sentence. 2 life plus 50-year sentence for a crime that she was wrongly accused of, despite being the victim of violence that she faced from her abuser. Or people like Ismael Lira, who was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility for parole, and has served over 19 years so far for a non-violent cannabis charge. I mean, we know the history of war on drugs, the 94 crime bill. There are millions of people that were unjustly incarcerated for non-violent cannabis convictions when cannabis is now legal in many states and a multi-billion-dollar industry. So let's make people whole. I would hate for Joe Biden in the next, I'm calling on him to do this in the next 48 days. I mean, he's the president until the inauguration of the president-elect at the end of January. But I would hate for him to leave office having a record on clemency that is where Donald Trump has a better legacy on clemency than he does. That's shameful.
That's a perfect segue. You've often said that policy is your love language. Politics is my love language. And it seems to me that the leverage you and your colleagues have to convince the president that this is the right thing to do increased exponentially because of what he did and the response he got, even from his fellow Democrats. Do you agree with that?
I think it certainly strengthened our hand. Again, I'm not, new to this this advocacy, and we did have some 60 plus colleagues who joined us in that advocacy. And let me just say this. Hunter Biden was targeted because he is the president's son. He was pardoned because he is the president's son. And Joe Biden should not stop at Hunter Biden when there are thousands of people whose lives are hanging in the balance, who are have experienced a great miscarriage of justice.
We're talking to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley from Boston and beyond.
So Just elaborate a little bit about the pardon. What did you think of it that Joe Biden did issue to his son?
Again, I'll let his statement speak for itself. But again, Hunter Biden was targeted because he was the president's son, and he was pardoned because he was the president's son. The president has the authority to do so, and I'm calling on him to use that authority in this moment to use the tool of clemency to reunite people with their families by the Christmas holiday, and to give folks an opportunity to make a positive contribution to society in the same way that my father has. And again, this is about people who are the victim of sentencing disparities. This is about cannabis convictions. This is about nonviolent offenders, people who are disabled and elderly who pose no threat to society, women who have been incarcerated because they were defending themselves against their abusers. So this is he has the authority, and it is a legacy. It's a matter of legacy as well.
You know, some of the chatter about Biden pardoning his son in the last couple of days is really, I don't know if amused me is the right word, but just seems so, the idea that suddenly people are thinking the justice system is unfair because President Biden criticized the justice system. But I think, you know, it's a cliche to point out, but if you don't have any money, if you're a person of color, you can't get a good lawyer, you rush through the overwhelmed court system, and the court system is overwhelmed, you know.
So should he be complimented because he made that clear that rich white guys with connections get pardoned? But
I think the idea that the justice system is necessarily just.
Well, who's saying that?
Well, I think that's what's been the political chatter. Oh, Joe Biden made people think the justice system is not fair. I think we knew the justice system wasn't fair, didn't we?
Yeah, we've always had a two-tier justice system. So, you know, that's certainly, you know, that benefits some and harms others. And again, look, the president has previously used his clemency power. He's done it to pardon people convicted of simple marijuana possession, LGBTQ plus former service members, and he has to continue to do it. So we've got weeks remaining in Biden's presidency, and the time to act is now. He should not wait until January, because we don't want any procedural hurdles to get in the way or for Trump to attempt to reverse the decision. He's got to act now.
Ayanna Pressley, that same day that he no longer has the power to do it is the day you start. Well, actually, are you sworn in on the same day, or are you sworn Congress members?
So actually, our swearing in, this is constitutionally as it is. Our swearing in is the 3rd, and then you have the ratification. Okay. On the 6th, I believe. Is that right? Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, and then actually, what is unbelievable is that the inauguration will take place on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. So you know how I feel about that.
Well, speaking of that, we have some sound. It's only a part, unfortunately, because we only have so much time, of an exchange you had on the House floor with Louisiana Rep. Clay Higgins during the House Oversight Committee hearing on the so-called Dismantle DEI Act. Here's a little piece of this discussion.
Please keep Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s name out of your mouths. Your perversion of his words and his mission, when his children have asked you to stop invoking his name and perverting his work.
That's exactly the kind of baked-in oppression. Like, how dare a white Republican quote Martin Luther King? We actually had a congressman say that just now. Well, thank you, good lady, for once again exemplifying the type of oppression that we stand against. You know I'm right. You know I'm right.
Can you fill in a couple of blanks here? What's the bill? And tell us a little bit about what this has been like for you.
Yeah, I mean, that was just, that was rich. Representative Higgins is not the poster child of oppression. He has a right to freedom of speech. I simply said that they were perverting and weaponizing the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a way to justify their dismantling of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is simply about a fairness and opportunity for everyone, including white people. I mean, if you think about affirmative action, who benefited from that the most? White women. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just race. It's people that are disabled. It takes into account many things. It's just about fairness and opportunity. But they are weaponizing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s words about the content of one's character over their skin to justify their dismantling of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I simply, if you watch my whole question line, I was walking them through American history and why it is for that reason President Biden did sign a executive action on racial equity across all agencies in the Biden-Harris administration as a way to acknowledge the wrongs of history and to create that level playing field and equitable opportunity. So what's it been like? Listen, I am battle tested. I'm clear-eyed. I've been here 6 years. I came in a government shutdown, governed under 2 impeachments, an insurrection, a pandemic. I have experienced a Trump presidency while governing and again, a pandemic which enacted wholesale harm. I am bracing for impact.
Well,
right now, I'm bracing for impact while recognizing that we still have the White House and we have to push this administration in these next 47 days or whatever is remaining on getting as many federal judgeships filled as possible. We need them to halt all deportations to Haiti because that is a death sentence. We need them to use the tool of clemency to reunite people with their families and give them an opportunity to make a contribution to society. And of course, I'm working to ensure that all of those Inflation Reduction Act dollars, Department of Transportation dollars, that those federal dollars are out of the door so that our governor, lieutenant governor, and all the mayors, have the dollars that they need to leverage to guard against what I anticipate will be wholesale harm. My district was one of the hardest hit by the pandemic, one of the hardest hit by a Trump presidency. And I have every reason to believe that the same will be true again.
Ayanna Pressley, you brought up what you would like to see the president do in his remaining, 48 days. There were 5 columnists at the New York Times yesterday did the same thing. One of the other things that's been discussed, Marjorie, the other day, when your colleague, Senator Markey, was on, we were talking about pardons, asked him about the topic of preemptive pardons for figures that people like the potential FBI head Patel and Trump himself have said they're going to go after, like your colleague, Nancy Pelosi, like your former colleague, now Senator Adam Schiff, maybe Kamala Harris. And he originally said, I thought he was quite candid at first, said, I have to think more about that. He seemed to be in favor of the concept. By the way, when you did a BR interview yesterday, when they wrote it up, as they often do, they mentioned that discussion and, of course, never mentioned that it happened on GBH because they don't do that, unlike what we do, which is credit people in their work. Do you think there should be...
Tim, don't change, brother.
Do you think there should be... Do you think there should be preemptive pardons for people who are likely to be prosecuted and persecuted by a Trump White House, by Joe Biden?
Yeah, I mean, you'll hate this answer, but I don't want to conjecture about, any of that. Like, I'm so focused right now. I think these things become, fodder and headlines. I'm talking about people's lives.
Yeah.
People like my father. We have an opportunity to change and save lives. And let me just say this, Jim, because as I do my analysis on the election and the outcome, one of the things that I think is really important is that, Democrats have to not be afraid of power. We want the power, but to do what? We have to not be afraid of power. And Joe Biden has the power. And in the same way that I called on him to use it for student debt cancellation, in the same way that I called on him to use it in a whole of government response to protect abortion access, reproductive rights, and freedom, in the same way that I've called on him when it comes to racial equity and the racial wealth gap and so many other things, use the power. Because scared power isn't power at all.
Was scared power part of the problem for Democrats on November 5th?
Yeah, I think it's part of it. I think that, I think it's commendable that adults, the Democrats always want to be the adults in the room. I think that the electorate doesn't always believe that we're the fighters in the room. Mm-hmm. And the things that we have fought for and won, we didn't do an effective job at messaging on them. Donald Trump had a clear message. You're experiencing pain, and it is their fault. It's an old tactic, scarcity mindset, othering, and he communicated it clearly and bluntly. I think the voters lose the plot on what Democrats have done because we get lost, we lose the plot. We get lost in our own slide decks and data points and all of that. You know, what we needed to be communicating is that we have the policies to alleviate the pain that you're feeling. The policies to give you the opportunity to make real on your dreams. We can't talk people out of their experience, Jim. I mean, this is something that burns me up. So look, as you know, 2 years ago, I started this group called Ayanna for Black Men.
Yep.
And it's because I was really keenly aware that Black men were experiencing a lack of visibility in many spaces, including by the Democratic Party. And I went to party leadership and I said, we have to address this. And I said, what am I supposed to say to a young Black man? And this had happened, who tells me they've applied for 16 jobs and didn't get one. And the response was, you'll remind them that Black unemployment is the lowest it's been in 6 decades. Now, come on. It doesn't matter if the stock market is doing well and unemployment is the lowest that it's been in quite some time, and we are making strides and recovering from the inflation of a COVID economy. And you're like, I have an idea about one day how you might be able to purchase a home. You know, I mean, when people are just trying to get by. So we have to actively listen. We can't talk people out of their experiences. And we have to make the case. Come on home. I'm prepared to do the work to rebuild this coalition. But then I've got to say to people, we want the power. We want the House. We want the Senate. We want the White House. But to do what? And then when we have it, actually do that thing. I mean, is that an audacious idea? Just do the thing. But, you know, again, people know we're the adults in the room. They don't know we're the fighters in the room. You know, we'll say, well, we can't because of the filibuster, and we can't because of this, and we can't because of that. This is not the time. The lesson learned is to not be afraid of power and to not moderate our aspirations. And also, guys, we got to get the narrative right. We were still counting votes as recently as last week. This thing was not a decisive mandate. And we have like a 2-person majority margin in the House right now. We actually picked up seats. You know, this is the slimmest margin since the 1930s. So we can't moderate our aspirations because guess what, guys? Progressive policies won on the ballot.
But he won on the ballot too, in the House, in the Senate, in the electoral vote, and a plurality of votes, Congresswoman, even though it is as close as you say. I mean, that's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, less than 50%. Less than 50%. So we have to tell that story accurately. Look, I just came from a Congressional Black Caucus meeting. We are now 62 members. The House, under minority leadership, under Hakeem Jeffries, we picked up seats. Not just, I mean, just for the caucus writ large, and, you know, several of those were Black seats. This is the biggest CBC in the history of Congress. So we have to tell the story of some of my classmates, Andy Kim out of New Jersey, of Alyssa Slacken out of Michigan, of Sarah McBride, you know, of Shamari in Alabama, you know, and we have to tell, because there were seats that we were victims of gerrymandering. We were victims of voter suppression. There were bomb threats. I mean, the whole story's not been told, which is why it really bothered me that people went out, you know, 24 hours after an election, reflexively offering analysis when votes were still being counted. There was still data to understand. So we still have to do the work of self-examination, guys. We have to look at the apparatus of our party. We've got to have some real conversation about the consultant class. We have to have some real conversations about messaging. We got out-messaged because we were not, the data shows that people that watch traditional news, we won them. People that are listening to podcasts or, you know, getting their news from social media, we lost them.
Well, I hope you didn't listen to our show the day after the election. Now, we're going to end on an up note. While you were just speaking, I want you to know that 2 copies of Unseen Scars were just purchased. One for Marjorie Egan, one for me. Next time you're here, maybe we'll talk about it. Ayanna Pressley.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your reelection.
Thank you all. Take good care.
Thank
care.
you
It's
very
good to
much.
talk to
We
you.
appreciate your time, Congresswoman. That was, of course, the voice of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and again, we appreciate her time. I want to mention I made a mistake before. I said
What'd you say?
Isabel Wilkerson wrote the Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow. She didn't. It was Michelle Alexander.
Right, it was.
Elizabeth Wilkerson wrote Cast and the Warmth of Other Suns, so I'm sorry about that.
We saw her a few months ago, if you remember
We
correctly.
did.
Yeah.
We did. All three of those are great
Embrace
books.
Boston
Anyway,
thing, yep.
thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. To people that came down to the Boston Public Library,
Thank you for
keep up
coming.
with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by NBC's Chuck Todd, former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, MIT economist John Gruber, on what Trump's tariff proposals will mean economically, and the author Paul Joyce on his book of It Started with the Hats, a detailed account of Boston gangs and the people who survive that gang life, how they get out of the gang life.